you said you don't like Polish people and you don't trust them.
That's not what I said.
Yes, that's what you said.
No. You must have misheard me. I like Polish people a lot.
Christ me, I never heard of this from you. I've heard this on the radio.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. You want to have a listen? Have a listen to what I said. Okay. Listen to this.
Yes.
I don't like Poles. I wasn't talking about Polish people.
Yes.
I was talking about polls. You know, when you do a poll to find out what people think. You know, like they say, 55% of people vote Remain, 45% vote Leave. That's a poll. I wasn't talking about...
but later on you said you don't trust them, so you don't...
I don't trust them. No, that's true. I don't trust Poles, and I don't like Poles because I don't trust them. But that's not Polish people.
No, that's what I thought. That's what I pick up.
Oh,
so
I'm terribly sorry. Listen, well, I would never say anything like that.
No, so in this case, I never learned English.
No, listen, it's fine. It's absolutely fine. I'm very glad you called in because I wouldn't want you walking around thinking that Mike Graham is a horrible bigot. He doesn't like Polish people.
No, I was thinking, what the hell? What's going on here, actually? I must be back and explain a few things.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. Welcome to the show. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk, the home of common sense. I hope you had a great bank holiday weekend. Hope you got some time off, got to enjoy. Well, we had some for a bit of it. I have to say, you know, all the lovely, wonderful events that were happening over the weekend, everything completely marred by that horrific event in Liverpool, of course, about 6 o'clock last night when a car ploughed into people, repeatedly veering left, right. Terrorism has been ruled out, no question, by the police. They say they're not looking for anyone else. They also revealed that a 53-year-old white British man from the Liverpool area has been arrested at the scene. This prompted, I think, very reasonable questions about why in some cases we're given more information very quickly about a suspect and in other occasions we're not given information, or we're given, should we say, misleading information. But we'll be talking about that story, of course, throughout the show. I'd love to hear your reaction to that as well. And whether you are listening on DAB Plus Radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, I'd also love to hear from you on all the big topics of the day. You know the number, 0344 499 1000. In particular, I want to hear from you about, well, the offerings we may get at the next election. It's quite a long way away, but certainly we're already seeing announcements being made, certainly by Reform UK leader Nigel Farage. In just under an hour, he's going to give a press conference in London where he's going to unveil a £5 billion pitch aimed at Labour's heartland voters. He's going to vow to scrap the 2-child benefit cap, restore winter fuel allowance for all pensioners, and give tax breaks for married couples to encourage them to have more kids to combat plummeting birth rates. Would you support that? Well, we may see tax rises rather before the next election. Indeed, in the autumn budget, the Chancellor Rachel Reeves will need to raise taxes by some £30 billion to deal with all the U-turns on policy and the extra spending on wage rises, the public sector and the like. I wonder where those extra taxes will come from. And the King is going to deliver the speech from the throne, that's what it's called, at the opening of the Canadian Parliament today. It will be the first time in almost 50 years that a British monarch has attended the event. It's being seen as a symbolic show of support for Canada amid tensions with the US after Donald Trump threatened to annex the country. I don't know. As the mothership, you know, we just have to deal with all the colonial children, don't we? Anyway, 10:05 is the time. Delighted to say that Tom Slater is with me, editor of Spiked Online. Very, very good morning to you. Thank you for joining us. I mean, I do want to hear from people on lots of different topics, and I want to hear your thoughts on both of these big topics, particularly about what Nigel Farage is going to say today as, top of the polls right now, but also, obviously, still these ongoing events, developments in Liverpool. Obviously, we have got an arrest, so we have to understand, that although no charges have been brought, we don't know if they will. We understand that the person arrested was the driver of the vehicle that ploughed into numerous people. 47 people injured, amazingly, extraordinarily, thank goodness no one has died. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on Nigel Farage's promises about winter fuel allowance, tax breaks, married couples, any of the two-child benefit cap to win over voters, but also your reaction to the information the police chose to give out yesterday about the suspect. We can talk in more sort of general terms in terms of police information to us in the event of attacks that people not unreasonably might think early on were terrorist attacks, and who could be behind them or what the motivation could be. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk and your message to 87222. You can get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. Tom Sater, to you first on what happened in Liverpool. 47 people hurt, 4 children included, taken to hospital, 27 total taken to hospital, 20 treated at the scene. 4 people, including a child, were trapped under the vehicle when it was finally stopped. Absolutely horrific. We know there's been incredible heroism from ordinary Liverpool fans who were at the victory parade for the Premier League title, who rushed in to try and lift the car, to rescue people trying to, push children out of the way. I mean, there was a pram left at the scene. A baby was among those that was hit by the car. Ordinary men and women just doing the right thing, the way that most people do. We also know, the police, medical staff rushing in, fire brigade doing what they can to try and save people's lives. A man has been arrested. What did you make of the fact that the police announced very, very quickly that it was a 53-year-old white British man from the Liverpool area who was arrested at the scene, and the contrast with the trickling out very slowly of information after the Southport attacks? And indeed, I was looking at tweets that the Merseyside police have released just in the last month about arrests made and even charges made, none of which mention the colour of anyone's skin. What did you make of it?
No, it's striking, isn't it? I mean, obviously, first and foremost, what a horrendous tragedy for a city and a football club which have had a fair share of tragedies over the course of their history. It is absolutely incredible that at least so far no one has actually succumbed to their injuries, and also incredible, frankly, that driver managed to get out there alive, given the response that engendered from a furious crowd.
I think the understandable response.
Absolutely. It's absolute horror show, but the discussion naturally turns to how the police are dealing with it, the way in which they've trickled out this information.
Could it have been prevented?
No, absolutely. There is a marked contrast, I think that's fair to say, between how they got out the information in relation to this suspect in contrast to what happened in Southport. There was the complicating factor in Southport, of course, of the murderer's age, which led, I think, to an extra level of caginess.
He was 17. He was a few weeks from his 18th birthday. And a judge did actually later allow him to be named before his 18th birthday on the basis that by the time he went to court, he would be named as an 18-year-old. But I wouldn't expect to be given a suspect's name on the day or before charging. I think that's
absolutely
fair. But the fact that the police chose to say the word white, now a 53-year-old British man or just a 53-year-old man from the Liverpool area would have been reasonable. Now, I did court reporting. I know, I'm a real journalist. I used to sit in court, I know what I'm allowed and not allowed to report from a court proceeding, or what I'm allowed to report when someone's arrested or someone's charged. And a lot of it has changed in recent years. There's been a lot of more grey areas than there used to be, partly because of online speculation. We know after Southport there was a lot of speculation about that it was, completely made up nonsense, by dodgy accounts on far right, and genuine for it, that it was an asylum seeker, a migrant, that and then the police put out no, this was it was someone boarding Cardiff, and then there was that picture we later saw of him at the age of 7 or 12 or something as a Welsh choir boy, and of course this did not actually match what people on the scene were saying. And it was, I think it was if not an outright lie, a deliberate obfuscation of the truth. They were trying to say, and we're told that they had to do that because of, racists and bigots. Apparently, like me, some of the words I've had, just simply say, we can only speculate why the police have given more information today than they would have in normal times. And a lot of people say, because if you don't say it's a white British man, then vile bigots and racists will start rioting. Do you think that's true?
I certainly think that's part of their rationale. I mean, I think they've taken on a really low view of the public in these situations, which is, if you present them with too much information, particularly if it's information that might seem to point in a particular direction, then you're just going to have repeats of the scenes that we saw last summer.
Because we're all naturally racist bigots.
Just ready to go off, basically.
Ready to go off at any moment.
Is how they say, which is why there's this tendency to manage, to drip feed. At the same time, they've now got themselves into a really tricky situation where I think they recognise, and you saw it in the police inspectorate report into the handling of Southport and so on, that they were too slow to present the information, that this led to an information vacuum which was exploited by precisely the kinds of bad actors that you were describing earlier, who, even after what happened in Liverpool last night, and even after the information was presented, were continuing to cast doubt and try and imply that maybe something was being hidden from them there. And the difficulty then
it's reasonable for people to not trust the police and the CPS and information. It is reasonable.
And I guess the difficulty is because there has been that profound lack of trust, which has happened for quite understandable, reasonable reasons, as you say, is that they're kind of damned if they do, damned if they don't. If they just say a 53-year-old man from Merseyside, there will still be this kind of clamour of questioning.
But what we would expect is consistency. That's what we expect. But again, remember with Axel Rudikapana, they also, on the day of the attack, which happened in the morning on the 29th of July, and he was eventually charged, I think, on the 31st. Yeah. But he was in custody within minutes of the attack. It wasn't like, we've got a manhunt. They had him in custody. He was seen by plenty of people. It wasn't. Within hours, certainly within a day, they had found ricin, and they had found an Al Qaeda terror manual on his computer. Okay, that wasn't released until way later, until long after he was charged, and he wasn't charged until October. Now, again, no other circumstances would you wait until October to charge him with those crimes after an attack in July. I think people are reasonable. I just find it extraordinary that. So anyone raising the point that the police give different information in different circumstances. For instance, remember Alison Pearson being arrested? We can't tell you whether or not what the crime was. We can't tell you what tweet it was that you wrote, Alison Pearson, when 2 police officers turned up at her door. But then they leaked the body cam footage. The only people who had access to it were the police. The police leaked the body cam footage of the conversation they had on her doorstep to The Guardian. They're very picky and choosy about the information they give out. And the argument always seems to be, yes, but we can't give out full information, or we have to give out full information if it's someone who's white, because otherwise you nasty racist bigots will go around smashing up asylum seekers' hotels or anyone you meet that's black. Actually, this is such a damning view that the police, the CPS, the authorities have of the general public.
And it's one of those things where now, in the wake of any attack like this, we end up having a kind of prolonged lecture about why people shouldn't speculate, which I think, first of all, seems to be a distraction from usually the horror which has just taken place itself. Yeah. Also, the issue after Southport, or even after what happened last night, and the kind of conspiratorial rumour mill that will start to swell, it's not individuals with 3 or 4 followers on X wildly pontificating, although that is still, shall we say, ill-advised at the moment. We don't know all of the facts. It's big accounts, people who should know better, who do know better, who's just pumping this stuff out because it means they get engagement and they get some money, and because of the fact it pushes their agenda. You allow those people much more room to operate when you are cagey, when you don't treat the public seriously, when you create a level of distrust within the public between them and the police because of how they handle cases like this. So surely be as upfront as possible, be as consistent as possible, as you say.
And that's it. That's all I'm asking for.
How you start to rebuild trust. It's really not that simple.
Yeah, it's perfectly fine for the police to say we can't give certain information. I mean, we even had Keir Starmer after Southport saying we couldn't give certain information, it would prejudice the trial. Rubbish. Absolute rubbish. What? Information about what he'd been charged with? Absolute rubbish. And there are other times when we get huge amounts of information beforehand. They pick and choose. And again, bear in mind, this is the same police force, Merseyside Police Force. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Give us a call, 0244 499 1000, and say our hearts go out to everyone in Liverpool dealing with this, because I'm absolutely terrified. I mean, look, there were so many people there at that parade. Everyone will know someone who was there. Everyone will know someone. And we're talking about children and people. I mean, it's amazing to watch some of the footage, and you see there's something to me. It's about the dads who literally like grab the kids and push the wives behind you. There's something just about like good people do the right thing. Most people, they're good people. They do the right thing, and the city coming together once again. I mean, coming together for something that was wonderful and really meaningful as a Liverpool fan, winning the Premier League. Bearing in mind last time round they weren't allowed to celebrate because we had lockdown. But then actually coming together over really important stuff. I know football's important, but it's more people being alive and people actually surviving that. I mean, I don't know what other words. People say the car ploughed in. I mean, there was someone driving the car in. It was an attack. I mean, people felt attacked. People were killed. People were hurt, but thankfully not killed. Some speculation, by the way, that the driver may have left a bar, may have been drunk. That's some of the speculation that is being reported today. So we'll keep you updated on any developments if the suspect who's currently under arrest is charged or not. We know that there is no terror link and no one else is being sought in relation to that crime. Let's also talk about something completely different. Benefits. Now, we know that Labour have been very, very big on, we're about tackling poverty, we're about, working people. A lot of people feel they are now the party of benefit claimants rather than the party of working people. The scrapping of the winter fuel allowance as a universal allowance has been a massive, massive vote loser for the Labour Party. They had pledged to keep the sort of end the two-child benefit cap when they can afford to. We're going to have a big press conference in 45 minutes from Nigel Farage in London. He's going to say he wants to return the winter fuel allowance to all pensioners, everybody, no matter, even the highest earners. He wants to end the two-child benefit cap. He's going to scrap that. He also wants to bring in a marriage tax allowance, tax breaks effectively for married couples, to encourage people to get married, to form family units, but crucially to have more children. I'm asking today which of these policies would people support or not support, and tell us why. 0344 499 1000 is the number to have your say on that. What do you make? Winter fuel allowance, bring it back for everybody?
I think that is clearly the politically sensible point, and I think that's the way to look at these measures, to be perfectly honest, is the fact that there will be arguments, the rights and wrongs of the winter fuel payments, whether or not it should be means tested, whether or not it should be universal. It's quite clearly become kind of political.
It's a massive cut through that policy.
It's something which came up time and again in the local elections, and I think it's therefore politically savvy for them to do this. The two-child benefit cap thing, I think, is in a sense even more interesting, because I think what Farage and Reform are beginning to recognise and beginning to tack towards is that the kind of voters that they're trying to attract, the kind of coalition that they're trying to build, is that kind of underserved portion of British politics who are quite socially conservative but actually relatively left-wing economically. So any policy which kind of signals that they can almost outflank the Labour Party on certain particular issues will play very well with those people. So I think that's really what we're looking at here, is a embrace, even if it's just around the edges, of that more red-blue politics which has proven so successcul. I
mean, I'd say, winter fuel allowance, if you instead of making it a £300 payment and you just put it into the main pension, just added it to the main pension, then higher earning pensioners will get taxed on it, and then you can basically means test it that way. There's a lot to be said for universal payments, simply because it involves less admin.
Yeah, a lot cheaper.
And it's much cheaper. There's most benefits that universal. Same with child benefit for years. It was just cheaper. The people who get it who don't need it are already paying enough tax. They've covered it anyway. And that's kind of the view. They don't need it, but also it gives people buy into the system.
Absolutely,
isn't it? I think it's insane to end the two-child benefit cap. The two-child benefit cap isn't the reason why families who aren't in work are on benefit, are even those benefits. The reason why they're in poverty is they don't work. And if you've got, 3 or more children, I suggest you should go out to work. It didn't apply to children who had been born before the policy was brought in. It was 2017 was the point at which any child born after that day. But there are people who'll be going on to benefits now who, single parents and the like. Well, then I'm sorry, Dad's going to have to pay more for you and Mum is going to have to get a job. By the way, like most mums who are married to the fathers of their children, giving more money, and it's an extra like £3.5k a year out of your and my money to people who are not working because they've had more children, seems to me to be madness.
Well, I suppose there's a couple of different arguments going on here. One of which is that there's a renewed interest, particularly on the right, on the kind of need to encourage various different kind of incentives people to have more and more children.
I don't want to encourage people who don't work to have children. Their children are less likely to work ever.
And the point being that any kind of thing within the system which might in some way kind of disincentivise that is probably one thing that they can patch these things together, along with the marriage tax breaks and so on that you're already talking about. I suppose the other thing, this is why Labour remain committed to it, which is whilst we can understandably look at the people's individual circumstances, bad choices that they're making, should the state be the ultimate guarantor of people making bad choices themselves? Absolutely not. But when you look at it purely through the lens of, will this measure help those children in terms of child poverty, there seems to be quite a
we could give all of those children £1 million and that would help them, but is that the right... I know, but
we could talk about anything like this.
Yeah, no, exactly. No, that's my point. There's no evidence that this will actually make the children any better off. What the children need is their parents to be in work, or their parents to stop having more children.
No,
because one of the reasons why they're poor is because they're not in work because they keep having more children.
But you don't legislate for a perfect world or for perfect individuals.
No, you don't. But you also don't provide perverse financial incentives for people to make the wrong decisions.
But it's one of those things where...
this is this idea that people who are on the lower level of income, whether it's benefits or not, don't make rational decisions. Yes, they do.
Oh, no, of course they do.
You're going to give someone an extra £3.5 grand to have another kid.
But this becomes an argument against any form of welfare state, full stop.
No, it doesn't. No, there's no safety net.
You need to take this to a certain level.
No, safety net.
If you're looking at a particular measure, which I think, as I say, in this context has more political significance than it really is even more of a kind of policy argument. On the Labour Party side, they're quite committed to it. They see it as the kind of unfinished business of the Brown government, child poverty and so on. On the reform side, I think it's purely what it symbolises, which is we can outflank Labour to the left on certain policies and cut through it. That's where I think really the debate is. But I don't think Nigel Farage or Richard Tice or anything, I don't think they actually believe in that policy. Listen, I want to get in one quick topic really, really quickly. A Macron v Macron. What do you make of this extraordinary video of a plane? Brigitte Macron is just slightly off camera, but the door opens to the plane as they arrive in Vietnam. Emmanuel Macron, you see her hand just like sort of smashing into it, well, two hands actually, smashing to his face. He's sort of actually a little bit sort of, off kilter. And then he sees the camera, smiles at the camera and waves, and then they walk down, stony face, separate, down the plane steps. Initially, Elysee Palace claimed, this was AI, it wasn't real. It was real. There were lots of different cameras that caught it. And then they said, oh no, they were just having a laugh. It's like, there was nothing playful about this. This was a woman smashing her husband in the face. Well, anything like this, that's almost, shall we say, a private moment, which otherwise, if it wasn't for the angle of the camera, became public. I don't think it becomes something. It's really difficult to say anything about it too definitively. Was it private? They're on a plane full of staff and crew. But again, we then end up kind of treating one little moment of interaction, which we otherwise wouldn't have seen if the camera was everywhere, hence as if it's like the Zapruder film and we're going through it frame by frame. Let's imagine if that camera had caught him doing that to her. But we all know why that's more significant, isn't it? But we do. Because in the other direction, because men are stronger than women. Yeah. Domestic violence and so on. Yeah. It's a slightly different but nevertheless, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well. 0244 499 1000. Going to take a quick break now. We're going to be talking to former Met Police DCI Mike Neville about Liverpool and the information we got from the police and our ongoing investigation into what happened and the tragic aftermath of that Liverpool victory parade. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
The police are still at the beginning of their investigation, and what they won't do is release information that they're not sure of. Otherwise, it leads to problems further along the line should there be any criminal or other court proceedings. They've been bitten like that a few times in the past. And so despite the pressure for them to constantly be telling more and more and more, they will only reveal information at the appropriate time when they're satisfied that it is actually correct.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning to you. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Tom Slate is still with me. Delighted to be joined now by Mike Neville. He's the former Metropolitan Police Detective Chief Inspector and joins us to talk about the absolute horror at the end of that Liverpool victory parade yesterday. Good morning to you, Mike.
Good morning, Julia. What a terrible, terrible incident. My thoughts and prayers go out to the people who are injured and their families.
Absolutely, and I think most people of the view it's a miracle that no one has died and people are still being treated in hospital. We know 47 hurt, 27 to hospital, 4 children were taken to hospital, and I think 1 child still remains in hospital. Absolutely horrific scenes. I just want to talk to you about, first of all, whether this could have been prevented. Now, a man has been arrested. He is the suspect. We understand he is the driver of the vehicle that ploughed into people. There are lots and lots of videos of this. What a lot of people can't work out is how a vehicle was able to get into the victory route in the first place, because surely these areas are all cordoned off and it's, this is a pedestrian area to all intents and purposes, apart from the victory parade bus with the Liverpool players on.
Yeah, it's quite incredible, isn't it, Julie? Because Liverpool is obviously a very, very successful football club. So these sort of parades are not an unusual feature of that city. And the parade is quite a long route. So all I can imagine is that there were staged road closures along the route. So you can't close every road in a big city like Liverpool for several hours while the bus is, say, 3 or 4 miles away. So I can only imagine that there was like a stage thing where every hour or whatever, every half hour, a different road was shut down. And something seems to have gone very, very badly wrong here, because the Times reported yesterday that the man was seen, the car was parked in that street. Yep. He left a bar, got in that car and drove towards the crowd. So it's just quite incredible, because normally when you see these parades and anything like demonstrations, the police will have coned off all the streets to say, there's no parking allowed here. So somehow, number one, a car has been allowed to park there the night before or that morning or whatever, sometime during the afternoon before the parade came by. And secondly, then it's been able to be driven into the crowd. There's really serious questions to be answered here.
Yeah, exactly. Now, although the police very early on ruled out that it was a terror attack, I think not unreasonable, given the spate of terror attacks we've seen, not just in the UK, and I'm thinking, Westminster Bridge and elsewhere, but also in Europe, and plenty in Germany, in Nice, and others since then in France, of cars being used as the attack, basically the weapon in the terror attacks. People are instantly going to go, oh my gosh, is this a terror attack? And in those circumstances, they're likely to jump to the conclusion, like the likelihood that it would be an Islamist extremist attack. This would be also what the police would initially consider as a major line of inquiry. What did you make of the decision by the police to release very early information that a 53-year-old white British man from the Liverpool area had been arrested? Was that the right information to divulge to the public? Was it necessary to say he was white or that he was British? Why do you think they did that?
Well, I think it was absolutely the right decision. Now, there's all sorts of accusations on Twitter and the like that this is two-tier policing, and if he was anything else but white, they wouldn't have said something. I hope it's a different situation. I hope that the police have learned lessons here. If you remember the tragedy of Nicola Bulley, the lady who went missing in Lancashire, and there was all sorts of conspiracy theories came out there because the police didn't give information. Then we had the awfulness of Southport, which resulted in a void, which was then filled and resulted in riots in Merseyside. So let's hope that the police have learned that lesson and therefore get information out which can be used and show the public this is what has happened. So it does stop people reacting in a certain way, because as you've rightfully said, at first sight, people would have guessed this is an Islamic terrorist incident, just like we've seen in all those countries like Germany, as you've already related. And so I think hopefully the police have learned some lessons here. There's nothing that's going to impact on any trial by giving that information. Because, of course, you remember during the riots, the Prime Minister told us he couldn't tell us about the suspect, Axel Ruda-Cabana, because it would have prejudiced his trial, and then went on to condemn anybody involved in the rioting in disorder or tweeting as right-wing thugs. So you can disclose something, can't you?
Well, yeah, but again, the Merseyside Chief Constable later gave evidence to select committees and saying that she wanted to divulge more information about Axel Ruda-Cabana at the time, but was prevented by the CPS. They have denied that. The Prime Minister himself said at the time that it was crucial that the information had to be withheld or risk collapse in the trial. I mean, I'm sorry, you're an ex-detective. I was a news reporter covering court cases. The information that... plenty more information would have been legally allowed to be given out that wouldn't remotely have created any contempt of court or prejudiced the trial. I think genuinely I think that's a lie, and I think that made the British public think that's a lie. Everyone's been telling me, other than calling me vile, the C word, bigger, you name it, when I prompted we can only speculate why the police chosen to give this information when they wouldn't in other circumstances, is that, well, it's because people like you are going to lead people to go out on the streets and riot, and, asylum seekers in hotels and hostels are going to get firebombed. But that isn't what the reports into the Southport riots actually says happened. There were a lot of yobbos and louts, and people were using this as an excuse. There were far-right accounts and dodgy accounts that were trying to stir stuff up. But it was the information vacuum. It was the view that people felt that they were not being given the full truth. That was the issue.
You're absolutely right. And as soon as the police or the authorities, the establishment, start to almost like not give information, people suspect there's a cover-up. And as I said, I can only hope this is the start of a new relationship between the press and the police. The police for the last 2 decades have really gone out their way to sort of antagonise the press and not give them information. That relationship they had with reporters, which could often help investigations and inquiries, was utterly lost. And I saw myself, a former commissioner. I brought a journalist in to do a good news story, and the commissioner had a fight with this guy. And I had to say, sir, this man's here to help us.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
It encapsulated the rupture of the relationship that had occurred.
Oh, absolutely. But that said, I mean, look, let me just read you out some tweets from Merseyside Police just in the last month. Charged. Following an investigation involving Merseyside Police, US law enforcement, 3 people have been charged in relation to reporting a fabricated serious incidents. No mention of colour. Arrest. Detectives investigating a High Valley burglary last month have arrested a 53-year-old Walton man. No mention of skin colour or nationality. Breaking. We've charged a man with attempted murder after a stabbing in Kirby yesterday. No mention of skin colour. Arrest. 33-year-old man from Huyton has been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder. No mention of skin colour. We have charged a 20-year-old man after a converted blank cartridge firing pistol was recovered from a house. No mention of skin colour. I'm just saying, they chose to mention the skin colour in this incident only. It wasn't an appeal for witnesses. And then you give a description: tall man, white or black or whatever, clothing. The choice to mention his skin colour is different from other incidents where skin colour would not be mentioned. And we all know the differences. If he's white, this has got mentioned because they think that everyone else is a horrible bigot and is going to go and riot on the streets. And if he's black, they don't want people to know that, or Asian, because then people go and riot on the streets. This is a view that the police and the authorities have of the general public, which is despicable, isn't it?
It is despicable, and what it is that the establishment have had an experiment in multiculturalism, which has failed, and now they're determined to sort of deal with anybody who challenges that. But I think in some of the incidents you mentioned, the sort of colour of skin is irrelevant here. Yeah. What gets me, Julie, is when you have somebody, we're looking for a rapist, and who's committed these wicked offences and ran off from a beach in, I don't know, Bournemouth, Blackpool, wherever else, and then there's no description.
Yeah. Tell me what the person looks like.
At this point, you actually know what the person looks like because they haven't told you, and that's a bad one.
And that's where we come back to Southport. Let me just read you what Liverpool City Mayor Steve Rodham has said. He's been speaking at the scene of the accident. Apologies, don't mean the word incident. We have to be very careful, obviously, because someone is under arrest. The incident. He said the question in the forefront of their minds, his mind, is why did a car end up in Water Street, which is where the car ended up, and that's for the police now to conclude their investigations. We'll find out the reason why it was there, as we were discussing earlier. Keir Starmer has issued a statement on camera, and he said it is a matter for the police that they gave details about the man who was arrested after the car ploughed into the crowd. He said, asked if he would like to see similar details released in the future in similar cases. The Prime Minister said that's a matter for the police, and the investigation is ongoing, so I think we need to leave that to them. I think today is a day really for thinking about all those impacted by this and being absolutely clear that we stand with them. What's your response to that, Mike Neville?
Well, it just simply shows the Prime Minister's hypocrisy, in my view, that he says one thing at one moment when it suits him and another when it doesn't. And we saw that, as I've already said, during Southport, that he was able to say nothing about one type of suspect and everything about the other. And his words may well have impacted on their some of the people's sentences. And I'm surprised that people like Lucy Connolly, their lawyers haven't used that as an argument to say they received undue sentences because those in the highest positions were calling for them. And so weasel words is what I would describe.
Very interesting point. Mike Neville, really appreciate you joining us on, aftermath of that horrific day yesterday. Former Metropolitan Police Detective Chief Inspector. Quick word from Tom Slater.
I think it's just a reminder, isn't it, like what happens when the police lose so much public trust. I mean, so much of their behaviour has been informed by a desire to manage public reaction to attacks rather than dealing in an upfront way with the attacks themselves. It's always the assumption that there is a potentially explosive cohort of people out there who could go off if given the wrong information at the wrong time, too quickly, too slow, incomplete. And the problem is, even though in certain circumstances their decision might have made more sense, it's certainly an improvement on the slow drip feed that we got after Southport, you then get a whole range of questions because that fundamental trust is just no longer there. So that's the thing that needs to be rebuilt. And you can only do that in a way that feels genuinely impartial, that feels genuinely consistent, and it doesn't seem to be informed by their prejudices about the public. Rather than the supposed public prejudices. So that's something they really need to work on.
Absolutely, thank you for that. Coming up, we're going to take a quick break. I want to get to your calls, 0344 499 1000. We've got packed up with guests in the first hour. We're going to be talking to a Reform UK London Assembly member about what we can hear from Nigel Farage today about two-child benefit cap, winter fuel allowance, and indeed tax breaks for married couples to have more kids. That's up next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 10:38 is the time. We're joined now by Alex Wilson. He's a London Assembly member for Reform UK and joins us just, about 20 minutes. I was worrying about my maths on a Tuesday morning. 20 minutes before a press conference in London where the Reform UK leader, Nigel Farage, is expected to make a whole slew of announcements regarding possible benefit changes that he wants to make and tax changes to, let's face it, try and steal some voters away from Labour. Very good morning to you, Alex.
Good morning. It's great to be on the show again.
Thanks for joining us. So, look, the announcement today, we understand, it's all been sort of, pre-released, is going to particularly involve, first up, basically reinstating the winter fuel allowance for all pensioners. How on earth will you afford that?
Well, as you said in your intro, there are three main things that we're looking to announce today. One is, as you say, restoring the winter fuel allowance, which has been a catastrophe for the government, politically, socially, economically. It's made life extremely difficult for the government. They as a whole, they dug themselves. And on the streets in the by-election that we've just won in Runcorn and the local elections, every day that we were out campaigning, this was one of the top issues that people were raising, and it's absolutely right that we respond to it. The government is potentially responding to it as well, although they haven't clarified exactly how they're looking to do that and when. So we've taken the initiative and said we would, if we were in government now, we would restore the winter fuel allowance in full. The other announcements relate to working families. And when Nigel took over the leadership of the party last year, and over the last year that we've been building our brand and building our party, we made it founded on three very clear fundamental values of family, community and country. And we want to be the party that stands up for working families. So that means making it easier for people to work alongside having children. So releasing the two-child benefit cap. And also the third announcement is about reinstating a transferable tax allowance, which will make it easier for two parents to share their tax allowance. So what we fundamentally want to do at the heart of everything, our approach to the economy, is about making work pay, and it's by making work pay that we can make it worthwhile for people to go out and work work and grow the economy.
The point of the transferable tax allowance between married couples, I assume that would apply if someone's not married but they've got a civil partnership as well, is it basically means that one half of you can probably afford to stay at home and be with the kids for a bit longer than otherwise many couples can afford to do. Now, we're told that one of the big issues there is about getting more people to have children, and we absolutely have a demographic crisis across the West and certainly in this country, and I've always thought the solution is, but actually the biggest issue for a lot of families is not the couples not having kids. It is settling down in the first place. People with huge student debt, they can't afford to buy a home. A lot of people will want to wait until they've overcome a lot of the financial difficulties and bought a home before they want to settle down or even rent a home big enough to have a child. Shouldn't you be focusing in on that rather than the couples who are in work worrying about their tax allowance?
Yeah, you're right. That's another angle that we will have to look at. We have a housing crisis in this country because successive governments and councils of all political administrations have simply failed to deliver enough housing for rent, for purchase, all kinds of tenure, and that's something else that obviously a new government will have to deal with, and we're very much
okay. But if you say,
we have to remember why these things are being talked about in the first place. We've had a cost of living crisis. Now, what triggered that in the first place? It was a cost of lockdown crisis. It was a cost of government crisis. Governments, both Boris's government, Rishi's government, and now Keir Starmer's government, making decisions that are making it harder for working people to get on in life. So what we want to do, we want to incentivise work. It fits in with our wider narrative.
Hold on. You want to incentivise work? I'm all for incentivising work. How does getting rid of the two-child benefit cap incentivise work? By giving people an extra ability to get £3,455 a year of universal credit or child tax credit for extra for each child that they have. The only people eligible for this are basically people who don't work, or maybe one person in the family works a day a week. They're not going to pay their bills that way. So what you're actually doing is saying to people, go out to work, pay your taxes, worry about your bills, and now you're going to have to pay between you another basic $3,500 for people sitting on their backsides having another child. Sorry, in what way does that incentivise work and family?
Make it easier to cover childcare costs so you can then go back out to work. But look at it in the round.
No. Those people are already eligible for free childcare. That's rubbish.
It's about making it easier for everybody. And
no, it's not about me. No, Alex. That doesn't make it easier for working families, all the millions of mums who are at work, 6 months, 9 months, a year after their child is born, to pay the bills, to pay the mortgage, pay their share of the rent, who are struggling to get by. Most of their income is going on the childcare. These are families who largely, almost entirely, don't work but have more than 2 children. Shouldn't the answer be, if you want to tackle child poverty, and we should absolutely want to do that, to say to those families, if you've got children, you should be paying for them yourselves and going out to work. And yes, that includes single mothers, single parents. I have friends and family who are single parents who have worked every single day of their child's life. Why should some parents be given a free handout to have more children, which most couples can't afford? Most people I know would have loved to have had either a second child or a third child or fourth child, but they couldn't afford to. Why should those parents be struggling and working hard and paying taxes to fund people sitting on their backsides on benefits, getting more money from us?
As I said, we need to look at this in the round with our wider policy agenda of incentivising work.
That's not incentivising work.
So it makes sense for people to go out and work, and this will help with...
That means they get more benefits for not working. How does that incentivise work, Alex?
Look at it in the round.
I am looking in the round. How does that incentivise work?
We want to make it easier and more worthwhile for people to go out and work, and that includes families with children. And remembering why we have these issues, because we have a cost of living crisis, because we have a cost of energy crisis, a cost of government crisis, all these issues need to be looked at in the round. We're the only party that's serious about trying to do something.
Well, you say you're serious about it, and you're going to get rid of the two-child benefit tax, two-child cap on benefits. Let me read you a message I got from a very old friend of mine who's been working on the front line in benefits office for years, who deals with the people who don't, hands out the food bank vouchers and the like. And that message says, I see Labour are going to U-turn on the... This is about Labour going to U-turn on this, and you guys following suit, are going to U-turn on the two-child ruling, as if that's going to help child poverty. These people know, rude word, all. And then there will just be more children in poverty, while the parents have more money to spend on gambling, drugs and takeaway food. You're right, it's insane. She works on the benefits counter. She deals with the people who are claiming these benefits, the people who come in and say, if I get a job or if I work an extra 2 days a week, how many benefits do I lose? Do you think she knows more about this topic than you or Nigel Farage or indeed the government?
As I said, we need to look at all of these issues.
Answer the question I've asked you.
One of these things, one of the aspects is about wanting to make it easier for people to have children, because we have a falling birth rate, and the other.
We should definitely be encouraging people who don't support their current children to have more children. Absolutely, that's a great idea.
We should be encouraging more families to have more children, because we have a falling birth rate. The other party's solution to that is mass immigration. Now, we don't want to open the doors to mass immigration the same way the other two parties have done that. We need to bring forward the next generation. This is one way of helping them. But as I say, look at it in the round. Our other policies about tax, about working, about incentives, that's what we're trying to build an overall picture. And today is an announcement that very much looks at the issues that we've talked about today. But the wider agenda that we'll be setting in the run-up to the next general election is about making tax incentives so it makes work pay.
Yeah, that doesn't make work pay. I mean, you're either the party of the working class or you're the party of the benefit class. Pick one.
We're the party of working families.
Well, and the families who don't work but keep having kids and expect the working families to work harder, pay more tax to pay for them. I mean, get that on a campaign poster and see how well it does.
Well, we'll see what Nigel announces shortly.
We will see. We will see.
10 minutes to go. And I'm sure your colleagues will be equally challenging to him in that press conference as you have been to me today.
Alex was enjoying coming on the show 10 minutes ago, probably less so now, but it's always good to get you on the show. Robust answers, I appreciate that. Reform UK London Assembly member. Quick word from Tom Slater.
It's a striking shift for a party who I think previously were more in the kind of Thatcherite sort of space.
They kind of got a mix and match, haven't they?
Also, because I think the other thing, if you look at public opinion, the sort of general view in relation to benefits has shifted a lot than it was in the kind of wake of 2010. I imagine partly because of how terrible an economic time it has been over that timescale, and how other issues have sort of leapfrogged the question of the welfare bill in terms of people's priorities. So it was quite clear is that they're reacting to that. aspects of public opinion as well as just politically how to manoeuvre themselves vis-a-vis Labour.
I think people change their views because they're massively misinformed about how the benefits system
also,
works.
rather than necessarily believing it in themselves. That's one thing which could well be true.
Yeah. Right. Well, coming up, I'm sure we're going to discuss more of that. I'd love to hear from you. 0344 499 1000. I promise after 11 we will be getting to your calls. We're also going to be talking about white men self-censoring themselves at work, apparently. Oh, yes, and one very prominent white man, King Charles, who's over in Canada, making a royal visit where he's basically opening the Parliament of Canada and we think giving quite a signal to Donald Trump, don't mess with my Canada. We'll talk about that with Ralph Hadel-Mancu in just a moment. This is Talk.
Times when if you don't bend, you break. And this is a time for the government as a whole to bend. It's time for Rachel, on behalf of the government, to say, look, we made a mistake. We're going to do this better this time. We're going to give it to everybody and tax it away, or we're going to find a way to link it to the lower bands of council tax. Find some way to link it to a reasonable and a fair way of distributing it. You have to acknowledge something went wrong, and that's a strong politician who does that. It's only weak politicians who pretend that nothing ever happened.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. Heated debate in the break, actually, with me and Tom Slater about the child benefit cap. Love to hear your thoughts on that. 0344 499 1000. Let's talk right now. I said Ralph, but it's Rafe. Rafe Hadel-Mancu is a world commentator, historian, and a senior fellow at the New Culture Forum, who joins us now to talk about a couple of other very interesting stories in the news. A very, very good morning to you, Rafe.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. Let's talk first of all about the King and the Queen. They have arrived last night in Canada, where the King is attending the opening of Parliament, the Canadian Parliament, and he's going to be giving a key speech there. How significant is this, given that it's basically the first time in about 50 years that a British monarch has gone to this event? And how significant is it in the context of Donald Trump, the southern neighbour of Canada, threatening to annex the country, which of course still has the same monarch as us as their head of state?
Yeah, this is the most consequential royal visit to Canada since 1990, when the late Queen visited Canada, when you had the Quebec secession reference, when, Canada came very close to being broken up into two. At that time, the Queen said, "I'm not just a fair weather friend, I'm here for the good times and the bad." And you could argue that that phrase could apply just as much to King Charles's visit, given that Canada is facing its most significant crisis since then, with, of course, epic trolling from Donald Trump, calling for Canada to become the 51st state, calling the then Prime Minister Trudeau, Governor Trudeau, huge tariffs and so forth. And so the Canadian government has finally rediscovered the monarchy after 50 years being rather embarrassed by it. Canadian monarchists wanted the Queen to come in 2002 and 2012 to open Parliament to mark her golden and diamond jubilees, as she had done for her silver jubilee. The Canadian government said, no, we're going to Canadianise the institution, just focus on the Governor-General. But isn't it funny how in times of crisis, the value of the monarchy as an asset?
Well, it is interesting that the statement. So we saw, the King greeting Mark Carney and was on a visit, and the support there. And again, this is a very, very fine diplomatic tightrope that the King has got to walk. And of course, there'll be a lot of guidance from Number 10. People always get, the palace doesn't decide these things. Number 10 decides these things. That's the reality. And it's about showing support for Canada, but also not wanting to anger Donald Trump, even though the stuff he said about Canada is frankly an outrage.
Well, of course, just to correct you slightly, number 10 is not involved in this at all. It's number 24 Sussex Drive.
No, there's no way that the King goes and does this without number 10 giving the sign-off. Come on.
No, I'm terribly sorry. I'm a trustee of the Canadian Royal Heritage Trust. Believe me, I'm fully embedded in Canadian politics. Yeah. The King acts entirely independently as King of Canada. The Prime Minister of the UK has no right to advise the King of Canada. This is the Prime Minister of Canada advising the King. And of course, he wears many, many crowns. The fact is, of course, the King does have to walk a diplomatic tightrope because, yes, as King of the UK, he has invited the President to a state visit. That went down very poorly in Canada. Yeah. Canadians were very upset about that invitation, and this is a way for the King actually to show that he is equally King of Canada. But of course, what he says matters. Now, the words coming out of his mouth will be actually Prime Minister Carney's words, because this is a speech from the throne, His Majesty's Canadian government, and so he won't only be reading out the platform of the government, he will actually be making some references towards Canadian sovereignty. But on that, of course, I'm perfectly sure that Mark Carney is bearing in mind the need to be careful about not stepping on Starmer's toes.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. This will be hugely diplomatic with everybody. I mean, whether or not they officially have a say, there's always you might find, Your Majesty, that you're a little bit busy that Tuesday, but he's not busy that Tuesday, and it's about sending that message. I do want to get in also as to, you and I often talk about sort of diversity, equality, and DEI issues, and the woke world, and it's very interesting actually. A little bit later in the show, we're going to be talking to the brilliant Andrew Doyle about his brand new book about the end of woke. I'm hoping he's right. I don't know if it is the end of woke or not, but it's an interesting new research by JL Partners. They did a survey of people in their offices, and a survey of 823 white men for a YouTube series, White Men Can't Work, concluded that almost half of white men say they are self-censoring at work for fear of causing offence. Almost a quarter believe they experience discrimination now because of their race and their gender. What do you make of that?
Well, no one should be surprised by this at all. As somebody who doesn't have a boss, I can't imagine what life, as I'm sure you can't, what life would be like working in one of these corporate worlds.
I do.
HR departments are the cancer at the heart of our corporations and our military and everything else. That's how woke ideology has seeped into the broader sphere. It's through HR departments, and white men have been cowed into submission. The constant messaging from the media, from HR departments, from government and everywhere else is that men are inheritors of white privilege. They're imbued, infected with
toxic masculinity.
With toxic masculinity. And of course, the only racism that's allowed today is anti-white racism. And misandry is something that's completely legitimate, whereas misogyny, of course, the slightest compliment to a lady will see you fired.
Indeed, I'm always amazed, actually. Again, we talk about, Macron v Macron. Everyone's going, ha ha ha, Bridget Macron smashing her husband in the face. Isn't that hilarious? Oh, imagine, a man doing that to a woman. Totally unacceptable. Of course, he's stronger. But why is it funny and acceptable if a woman does it? The mockery of men in adverts now as well. Just dads are hopeless. They're hopeless at being, men are hopeless at being dads. They're hopeless at housework. Men are just genuinely useless and stupid. It's an incredible message to send out to our young boys and men, certainly. But again, I suppose the argument is that, white men, lots of people would say, white men had it too good for too long, and now's the backlash. What do you say to that?
Well, we know, of course, that whether you're talking about a reverse discrimination, affirmative action policies in America and so forth, All of these things backfire. As soon as you try to discriminate in order to advance another group, that causes tension. We know all the unconscious bias training backfires terribly. We know that white working class boys are the most disadvantaged group in society. Yes. And that's because they're accused of being racist and, of course, being imbued with toxic masculinity as well. And yes, you're quite right. The emasculation of the white man on television adverts, in all television programming, when you see a white man in a television advert, it has to be said.
This is a good point.
It's terribly dispiriting. And, of course, the world around us, everyone likes to hit on men. The world around us was built by men. The great buildings you see, the laws of this land, the government, everything in this world.
To be fair, we weren't allowed to do anything. We just had to have kids.
That's true. Now, you played an important role, but no one can deny that the world around us was created by the Western man. That's something that all men should be proud of. You know, not something you should be like, you didn't do it yourself, but it's time for men to actually stand up for themselves. Okay. Push back against all of this.
Very interesting. Thank you very much indeed. Always so fascinating to talk to you. Rafe Hadel-Manky, royal commentator and, of course, historian as well. I'll get Tom Slater's thoughts on this. I say we're going to be talking to the brilliant Andrew Doyle about his brand new book, At the End of Work. He may be more optimistic than me on that front. Lots more coming up. I promise we are going to get to as many of your calls as we can in the next half hour. We're going to be talking about more on not just what Nigel Farage is promising in terms of winter fuel allowance, benefit caps on children, number of children, etc., tax breaks for married couples to have more kids, but also want to hear your thoughts on the police information that was given out regarding that horrific scenes in the Liverpool victory parade yesterday, which left 47 people injured. Thankfully, no one dead. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense.
Is it transphobic to say only women have a cervix?
Well, it is something that shouldn't be said. It is not right. A woman is an adult female, and the court has made that absolutely clear. I actually welcome the judgment because I think it gives real clarity. It allows those that have got to draw up guidance to be really clear about what that guidance should say. If you want to fight for Remain, vote Labour. Now, there are some who say we don't need Brexit to work. We need to reverse it. I couldn't disagree more. Day after day, there are new allegations of sleaze, of favours, of privileged access. And it's all very well the Prime Minister saying, well, say now, well, I'm paying for it.
You've decided to repay £6,000 worth of gifts.
Lord Ali is facing an investigation. I wonder how concerned you are that your biggest donor was not fully transparent.
Are you saying you made a mistake?
It was right for me to make those repayments. Thank you. Of course, I wouldn't want Donald Trump round for dinner, but don't underestimate the danger to the world if Trump is re-elected this time around. I'm anti-Trump. I would like to send my warmest congratulations to President Trump on his inauguration as the 47th President of the United States.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning. Welcome to the show. Welcome back to the show. If you've been listening for the last time, we've got a rip-roaring couple of hours still coming for you here at Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. And whether you're listening on DAB Plus radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, it is great to have your company. Coming up in this hour, we are going to be talking more about the car that ploughed into a crowd of Liverpool fans celebrating their team's Premier League title on Monday night. Left 47 people injured, including 4 children. Police investigating the ramming in Liverpool city centre are not treating the incident as terrorism. They say a 53-year-old white British man, is how they described him, from the Liverpool area, was arrested at the scene. We'll bring you any developments on that later. We have, of course, had statements from the Mayor of Merseyside and also the Prime Minister on the information that was given out by the police. We're also going to be talking about a press conference that's due to be held in just a couple of moments in London by the Reform UK leader Nigel Farage. We understand he's going to unveil a £5 billion pitch aimed at Labour's heartlands. He's going to vow to scrap the 2-child benefit cap, restore winter fuel payments for all pensioners and give tax breaks for married couples to encourage bigger families. He'll say in a bid to combat plummeting birth rates. Plus, we're going to talk about foreign affairs. Russia has suggested that Donald Trump is suffering from emotional overload as the Kremlin deflected his criticism of its record drone strikes on Ukraine at the weekend. The UK and the US have also now decided to lift all remaining range restrictions on the use of their weapons, so allowing Ukraine to use their weapons further into Russian territory. This after Donald Trump said President Putin had gone absolutely crazy. Meanwhile, the Tories are prepared to quit the European Convention on Human Rights, that's the ECHR, after 9 European leaders have now attacked the court for preventing the deportation of foreign criminals. Oh, it looks like Kosovo might be the option for actually sending our asylum seekers who have failed as a return hub. Kosovo said it is open to the idea after, well, pretty much every other country said no. Anyway, we'll talk about all of that. And joining me for the chat is Dom Slater, editor of Spiked Online. Very good morning once again to you. Thank you for joining us. 2 particular topics I want to hear from you guys on today. I'm asking Tom about these as well. One is your reaction to what the information the police gave out about this horrific scene in Liverpool, and the choice to say this was a 53-year-old white British man. Do you think they've learned the lessons of Southport? Was that not just an information vacuum, but I think deliberately, disingenuously, not incorrect, but just misleading information was given out about the then suspect already in custody, Axel Ruda-Cabana. I'd love to hear your thoughts. So 0344 499 1000. Does this betray the police sort of learning their lessons, or betray the fact that the police just genuinely think that we're a whole bunch of racist bigots who can't be trusted not to riot all the time unless it's a white person in custody? I just think there's some really questionable views that are being held by senior figures. I want to hear your thoughts on that. 0344 499 1000. Also want to hear what you have to say about Nigel Farage and his announcement. It's going to be in the next few moments, promising to reinstate winter fuel allowance, bringing in tax breaks for married couples and scrapping the 2-child benefit cap. He thinks it's going to win over voters, but I'm not sure scrapping a cap on people getting more money for having more kids when they don't work and support the kids they've already got is a good idea or a vote winner. Call me old-fashioned. I want to know which of those policies you support, which you don't. Tell us why. Do you think it will bring in votes? 0344 499 1000 is the number to call for all the topics. Text the word TALK and your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1. Standard network rate message. Right, let's go back, Tom, first of all, to what happened in Liverpool. Horrific attack. I use the word attack because people were attacked. Now, we don't know the motive of the suspect who is in custody. No charges have been brought as yet. We do, though, know a 53-year-old white British man from the Liverpool area has been arrested. Police were very quick to say this. We knew this long before we even knew how many people had been injured. That press conference was about 11 o'clock last night. 47 hurt, 27 to hospital, 4 people, including a child, trapped under the car, 4 children taken to hospital. I mean, unbelievably sad and horrific scenes. Scenes that made a lot of people very angry. People attacking the car, the police having to take the driver of the car sort of into a police van for his own protection at one point. What do you make of the incident? The fact that a car was able to drive in these circumstances? We don't know the motivation. We're told it's not terror, but also the information the police gave out.
No, first of all, you want to start with the tragedy the horror of the thing itself. I mean, it is incredible that at least at the current time, no one has lost their life, considering the speed that car ploughed into people, the number of people who ended up in hospital, even small children being pulled from underneath that car. It's incredible and horrific for the football club and for the city. And then you do have to ask questions primarily about why was this car on that street at that time. This was a huge operation, a huge policing operation, a huge event that is taking place in the city. Why was you ever having pedestrians and cars using the same space? Was always a terrible idea. That's not to strip the person who allegedly committed this of any agency, but it's just to say it's one consideration. We're starting to see some reporting tumbling out about him potentially having recently left a bar and so on. So all of those details will come out in time. Your discussion then turns to how the information has been managed this time around, and you can't help but be struck by the contrast between what happened after Southport. We had this very slow drip feed of information, and we're in this situation where not only got the kind of profile of the attacker very quickly, there was also a level of detail that we don't normally see. Him referred to as a white British male was something.
This is simply not, unless the police are saying we're searching for this man, this is what he looked like, it's what he was wearing, when the colour of the skin would be very relevant. Okay, man, colour, height, why was it relevant that he was white? I've read out to a police guest a little bit earlier on the show, about half an hour ago, and the last sort of, like 5 tweets announcing a suspect being arrested or charged by Merseyside police, this police force, and none of them mention colour at all.
No, it's certainly something that you just don't see, whether it's Merseyside police or any police force. Those two responses to those two incidents seem very different, but there is one thing that connects it, which is an assumption that the public are going to kick off because they're racist, and if they find out that, for instance, in the case of Axel Ruda-Cabana, this was a young black man of Rwandan heritage, or in the case of this particular attacker, seems to be a white gentleman. If you weren't not forthcoming with that information, but very forthcoming with that information, all hell would break loose. And I think that's something which the police really need to get over. I understand that there is only so much they can say at certain junctures. It is important, and people should know.
And Axel Ruda-Cabana, bearing in mind, was 17.
Which did inform a little bit. But that was about naming him.
Yeah, as long as you're not naming somebody.
It wouldn't have made any difference, as you say. So the thing they need to get over is this idea that the public are a problem to be managed. Because actually, perversely, well, obviously, in the wake of Southport, we did see those horrendous riots that went on for days and days. They were the flames of that were, at the very least, fanned, shall we say, by a lot of online scumbags with big followings who were purposely pumping out false information, because they always do that after every attack, no matter who committed it, because they've gotten a certain agenda to push and they're willing to push it. You created the space for them to do that by being so cagey. So if you drop these prejudices about the public, you might not make it so easy for people to spread prejudices
to exploit
online.
it. And exactly what's interesting, last night on social media, I was being told by people, oh, you're a bigot, you're a vile, this, because I simply said we can only speculate why the police choose to give more information on some attacks than others. And people go, oh, because bigots like you with your accounts, you'll encourage bigots to be out on the streets. Like, talking about, if it's a Muslim or a asylum seeker. I didn't mention anyone's skill. I didn't mention anyone's religion or any motive, because I don't have that information. And I haven't done it. But the only people talking about it are the so-called woke left. Fascinating. I checked just sort of the first 30 accounts that called me the C word. All of them without exception, had a European flag with your little yellow stars in their bio. I think they thought I was a vile bigot for voting for Brexit. They thought, by the way, you were as well. If you vote for Brexit, they thought that about you too as well, just so you know. I mean, this is the thing. It's the elite classes who are obsessed with the idea that everyone else is a horrible racist bigot and unable to control their emotions. And we know from the HM Constabulary report into Inspector Constabulary report into the riots that most people were not motivated. Most people who rioted were not motivated by any political views or religious views. They were the ideological views. They were simply the people who were rioting, as opposed to people who were peacefully protesting and were upset and angry. The people who were rioting and throwing bricks at police were a bunch of wrong-uns who mostly had a string of convictions already for violence. So, I mean, it's just... Keir Starmer has said... asked if he would like to see similar details released in future about cases, about details about the man. He said, that is a matter for the police and the investigation is ongoing, so I think we need to leave that to them. I think today says it's a day really for thinking about all those impacted by this and being absolutely clear that we stand with them. The Liverpool City Mayor, Steve Rotherham, has also asked questions about... When he said it was the police were absolutely right to release the suspect's ethnicity. He defended the decision, claiming nefarious groups have been trying to stir up speculation on social media. Again, I think most people, when they saw a car plough in, apparently deliberately, repeatedly into a crowd of people, were not unreasonably considering the strong possibility it could be an Islamist extremist terror attack.
I mean, that's...
The police will have thought that as well.
No, absolutely. There's certain attacks which have a certain
modus
profile.
operandi.
Exactly,
yeah.
They have a certain. But the Nice truck attack or the Berlin van attack of a few years ago.
Westminster Bridge.
The Westminster Bridge, of course, which began with him ploughing into pedestrians before jumping out with knives. It fits a certain profile. I think one thing that we're starting to realise is, and this is why genuinely it is good to wait for more information to come in. Whether it was the Magdeburg attack in Germany just around Christmas, where it seemed at first very much to be an Islamist attack, turned out to be a very deranged individual, an ex-Muslim who thought the German state were too pro-Islam for some bizarre reason. And in this case, we don't know anything, but it doesn't seem to point towards any kind of ideological motivation, whatever. So another example of why it's always good to wait for more information to come in. But how about the police be more upfront with the information they're giving us and also be consistent in what information they're willing to give us.
Because
by releasing that information in the way that they did last night, they almost made things worse for themselves as well, because that extra detail of him being white British has just been another
That was information apparently we couldn't have learned before because it would have prejudiced a trial. I mean, that's the thing. Even the Prime Minister after Southport, I mean, he was defending the fact that we weren't aware that ricin had been found and terror manuals, because they were so insistent it wasn't a terror attack, and yet this guy, because they weren't sure what the motivation was. I mean, again, stop treating us like mugs. That's all I say. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. And again, the main thing is that, thank God, no one died. That's the main thing. But there are an awful lot of people very, very traumatised, people pulling their children out. I mean, it is an absolute miracle that we didn't see people die. Let's also talk about what Nigel Farage is going to announce. Winter fuel allowance, return to all pensioners. Again, as and when finances allow. Again, if reform came in 28, 29, are we assuming that they'd have any more money than Labour will? Apparently, we've still got all these massive black holes. There's talk about how there's £30 billion in tax rises that Rachel Reeves' a chance going to have to find, because actually they've already run out of money. And again, the cost of borrowing goes up. But also ending the two-child benefit cap, but also marriage tax allowance, tax breaks for married couples being able to share their tax allowance. So basically, what that does is it enables usually mum to stay at home and have kids in a way that she wouldn't be able to do so, because there's basically an extra tax benefit there. Would you support any or all of those?
Well, I think individually one can argue over them. It's a bit like something like the winter fuel payment. When people say, isn't it a bit of a crazy situation? We have even quite rich pensioners who are in receipt of this. It's something, in the kind of cliche, using that money to heat the outdoor swimming pool, rather than actually being in need. The problem is...
That's someone I know.
The issue is with... the benefits like this, certain ones of them are made universal for the very simple fact that if you were to try and means test it would become an incredibly expensive and incredibly bureaucratised process, and therefore you might as well just give it to everyone. I think in this case, the reason that Reform are particularly willing to say that they're going to scrap it is that it's really cut through with people. I think when you're talking about benefits, particularly for older people, that has a certain resonance, because these are people who kind of by definition have paid into the system, who by definition have, been contributors for society for a very long time. Yeah. I think those are the people that, across public opinion, are almost most reluctant to take things away from, even if they're doing all right for themselves, because you kind of think that's what any sort of social
There's an element where they paid in. And there's just an argument about universal benefits just being cheaper to administer. Again, the simple solution to this, put it into the main pension, the £300 one-off payment, put it into the main pension, and then you can tax the richer pensioners on it. I don't see why it's complicated about that. Just let you know, Nigel Farage is speaking right now. We will bring you any news on what he's had to say. I'm just massively opposed to the two-child benefit cap being scrapped. I'm very pleased when that was brought in. I think Ian Duncan-Smith was the welfare reform minister, who's work and pensions minister, who wanted to bring that in. Two-child benefit cap, as I read out actually to a Reform UK representative from a friend of mine who works on the benefits desk in the benefits nation, the job centre, that actually it's not going to help the actual kids. You improve the income for the family, but you don't actually help the kids, because those families are already making very poor choices. Why would you keep having kids? If you can't afford the first one, don't have a second. If you can't afford the second, don't have a third or a fourth. Am I old-fashioned? Love to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Let's get straight to a phone call before we go to a break. Actually, Tina is in Birmingham, and Tina, you wanted to have your say on those reforms that Nigel Farage is announcing right now. What do you want to say?
Yeah, can I just first give my thoughts and prayers to everyone of Liverpool?
Absolutely.
Absolutely horrifying, the second tragedy that hits Liverpool.
Absolutely.
But no, I am a Reform voter, and I'm with you. Don't remove the two-child cap.
Why?
Don't remove it. You have kids if you can afford them.
Yep.
My husband left me after our second child, and I went without because I got no support off him to make sure my kids had everything. But he did have a good job. He worked at Rover, and then he left. I'm
so sorry, but how could you not get the money? This is one of the number one things we need to sort out. Is the dads who don't pay? Well, dads or mum, whoever's left, not paying for their share of the kids, because everyone else having to help out and you struggling and the kids struggling. You have kids, you have to pay for them. End of.
Simple. Yeah, I remember asking him to get a coat. I was going to pay him, and then he didn't turn up for his child visitation. So then I ended up having to take the baby up to get his coat.
Yeah.
It's just ridiculous.
Just horrific.
If you can't afford the kids,
don't have kids. But also, I mean, are you working now, or did you go to work after they went to school, or what?
Well, unfortunately, I didn't go straight away after my youngest son was born, because I got hit bad with postnatal depression and stress. But as soon as I felt comfortable, I did go back to work. I went back part-time, working term time only.
Yeah.
Then I started my own business.
Good for you.
Which unfortunately didn't pander out as well enough to support him.
Yeah.
So,
but you did your best. I mean,
I did the best that I could.
And these are exactly. And you're exactly the sort of person that people go, well, you know, you're trying your hardest. I mean, I'd like to have a firm word with your ex. I have to say, against the wall, pin him up. But I have to say, I feel rather strongly about these things. But at the end of the day, if someone's got, I mean, there are people who say, well, like, you know, I already had 3 kids who are on benefits, but I would still say at that point, well, then you need to get a job. Would you not say? As opposed to claiming an extra 3,500 quid a year off the rest of us.
Yeah, I went back to university, trained to be a baker.
Yeah.
Then got a full-time job working as a chef as well.
Great.
Unfortunately, yeah. And now, unfortunately, I'm off on disability due to having issues with my hands. And if you can't pick up an empty fryer, you can't.
You're not much use on that. Oh, no, not much Tina, you've had a string of bad luck, and you seem to me, I'm sure our audience will agree, exactly the sort of person who, you know, when you try, keep going, you get bad luck, you know, life's hit you hard, you get back up again. You're exactly the sort of person that we should be helping. But I just don't want to be giving extra help to the families who are making all the wrong choices. Tina, I so appreciate your call. I hope her life is treating you better. Tom Slater, you and I were just talking about earlier. You like the view, but the damage to these kids. If parents have got 3 kids and they don't get this extra money, then you know that is going to hurt those children. Again, people I know working the benefits are pointing out that actually, and I'm trying to find some notes here somewhere, actually, you know, the family income goes up, but it doesn't necessarily help the children.
Well, I think you could clearly see that there's going to be a number of cases in which that's going to be absolutely true. I mean, there's often, particularly on the left, a kind of assumption that people who are kind of on benefits in a way that is deeply problematic for themselves and for their families, dependent on it.
They're swinging the lead.
Absolutely, just taking the mick. I mean, that's something which is so clear. When people pretend like that doesn't happen at all, they're just taking everyone for
you know
mugs,
who's most angry at those people? It's not the middle class people going like, oh, there's some people over there, but I'm not bothered. But there's people who live next door to them who get up at 6 a.m. to go to work every day and live in the same house, go on the same holidays, drive the same car, but they're going out to work all day. They're the people who are most angry about it, and understandably.
Absolutely, the whole kind of people who are really into the sort of welfareism as almost like an end in itself. Like this is just a fantastic
it's a patronising view of the working class.
I know, absolutely. But when you have a welfare system, as we do, and I think the vast majority of people would support it existing in some way, shape or form, there becomes choices that you make for different reasons. In this case, I think you look at the kind of projections which are made in relation to, if you bring in this particular measure, lifting 250,000 children out of poverty.
But you don't lift children out of poverty, you just give their mums more money. That's not the same as getting the kids out of poverty. It's like the kids who don't get fed before they go to school. It's not because mum can't afford a loaf of bread or a bowl of cereal. It's because mum can't be bothered to get her backside out of bed to feed them.
Those people absolutely exist. That's not clearly going to be everyone. And those are the choices you go.
Who do you think in this country, on benefits or minimum wage, can't afford to feed their kid breakfast?
I can answer the previous question, or I can answer that one.
All right.
But the point is, and I think you're more passionately against this than I am passionately in favour of it, because I don't think that welfare is the end point of everything. But I think it becomes a question about where you're going to allocate resources. And also, to be brutally frank, I think the reason this has become an issue, the reason that Reform are running with it, is because it's a bruise to punch with the Labour Party, because there's a lot of people internally who are very irritated by the fact.
And Labour MPs very unhappy.
So this is something which will cause trouble for them. And I also think it is part of Reform trying to essentially provide things that they can point to which suggest that on certain social policies and welfare policies are actually to the left of the Labour Party, which I think, even if it's not this particular measure, as a package of measures,
the sort of thing.
Is the sort of thing that will help them break down that kind of, they are the Thatcherites who want to sell off the NHS.
The British voters, kind of interestingly, are actually on social issues are very conservative, but on tax and benefits things are actually very left-wing. Interestingly, again, I think a lot of it doesn't marry up, and again, I think that's also because people don't. So when you say, for instance, let's give an extra £3,500, best part of, to families for each extra kid after they've got two, right? So how are you also going to help other families be able to afford to have a kid, because they're paying more tax to pay for that benefit?
And it's
you can't have both. You can't just keep giving money to them and then expecting those other families, the strivers, as they call them, the hard-working families. Most of them are just making ends meet as it is.
I know, and it's one of those things where how these things poll depend on how you present them, depends on what kind of trade-offs. That's the thing about anything in relation to policy in this area, particularly in the quite kind of economically austere times that we live in terms of the economic shocks that we've had one after another of recent years. But at the same time, what I think is interesting is the politics around welfare and how public opinion is very different to where it was in about 2010, not least because of the fact that we've had so many kind of wasted years, paltry growth, continuing economic crises, and I think that has shifted the dial on where people feel about some of these things.
Just so Nigel Farage is speaking right now, and he has said that no one's going to trust the Tories again. He's obviously moving on to the Tory and Labour ground. We saw that in the local elections as well. Bring you some more detail of what he had to say coming up. Going to get to your messages, going to get to your calls coming in on the two-child benefit cap, but also on what the police had to say about the suspect arrested in Liverpool after that horrific car ploughing into the crowds at that Liverpool victory parade. 11:25 is the time. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
They did it from the beginning. They were very critical of the scrapping of the winter fuel allowance. They were in touch with voters, particularly in the red wall seats. They knew this would go down badly, and they were proven absolutely right. I think Labour have shown that they're no longer in touch with their heartlands and no longer in touch with their base. And they don't want to fully reverse scrapping the winter fuel allowance, so they're trying to find a fudge. I mean, they just expended so much political capital for so little savings, relatively. I mean, you're not really saving that much.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. 11:26 is the time to let you know the Reform UK leader Nigel Farage is speaking now at a press conference in London. He's going to be announcing some big changes to their sort of tax and benefit policies. He has said if you vote Reform, you get Reform. That is their big slogan. He's also said the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, is hopelessly out of her depth and that no one will trust the Tories again. He's definitely going for Labour and the Tories. Some of your messages coming in about the announcement on the two-child benefit cap being scrapped and tax breaks for married couples and also winter fuel allowance being returned to all pensioners. I'm asking you, which of those policies would you support? Marcus says winter fuel allowance should be means tested, catered for in self-assessment. Tax breaks and promote the family unit, absolutely yes. The two-child benefit cap should be kept. Jack says Farage will promise the earth but give you absolutely nothing. Chris says I'll vote for him if he actually puts the interests of Brits first. Mick though says don't care about this snake's policies. I'm voting with Rupert Lowe. I hope he sets up a new party. Harry says lifting the two-child benefit cap is irresponsible fiscally speaking. Allowing people to maintain a lifestyle by having more kids funded by the taxpayer is a bad example to set for everyone. Here to that, Harry. And Sarah says Reform going full National Socialist with their socialist policies. National Socialist being, of course, the Nazis. Full title. Sarah, sweetheart. Let's try and up our game, shall we? Gary says, reform, please do not scrap the 2-child limit. You will encourage more unemployed individuals to have kids they can't afford. It's unsustainable. Bring in some type of tax relief or reduction for working mums or parents instead. Clive says the child benefit cap should stay. Not a popular policy, is it, so far, reform? Let's talk to Alan, who is in Salford. He's given us a call on 0344 499 1000 to have his say. Alan, what do you make of this plan to scrap the 2-child benefit cap?
Well, I've got two points. It's the first one about the winter fuel allowance.
Yeah.
If you don't mind.
No, go for it.
Yeah, it should be £100,000. Anything below that, I'm afraid. You know, I'm a pensioner.
So if you you're saying anyone who's got an income of under £100,000?
Yes.
But that's most. I mean, come on, that's so few pensioners. You're better off not going through the mess of means testing and just give it to everybody. Because the people, if you're a pensioner, you've got £100,000 income right now from your pension, you're paying a whack load of tax on that already.
Yes, I know, but I don't think there's many people with £100,000 pension, to be honest. But it probably is. But
there'll be some millionaire pensioners, but in which case you may as well just give it to everyone and they'll pay it back in tax.
Yeah, well, I suppose you're right. But on the 2-child benefit, you know, I think he's being silly, this fella. He's moving farther left than he's ever done. And you know, I voted reform because I wanted him to move a little bit further right than the Tories. And it makes you laugh. There's always mollycoddling the feckless. Honestly, you know.
I mean, I have to say, we're not getting much support for this policy. I mean,
no.
There's a lot of people who are concerned. For instance, like the Labour Party say they're going to, deal with, want to tackle poverty, and they want to, but they also want to cut benefits, and people get worried about disability benefit going down and things. But most people also are aware that, for instance, we need to stop more people from going on disability benefit who aren't actually disabled or incapacitated or sick. But those you can want to help out the people who are in difficulties at the same time as wanting to cut the overall cost, because you get rid of all the people who aren't needing it.
Exactly, but as well as this, the upping the cap to 2 or 3 children, 4 children, whatever.
Well, no cap at all.
The cost goes on to companies, because everybody, what I see, I know a couple that both had their maternity leave.
Yeah.
So what about, is that 6 months pay?
I mean, anyone who can survive on the maternity, it's about like 120 quid a week or something. It's been a long time since I've had maternity pay. No, but the government pays, the companies get that back from the state, from taxpayers.
Yeah, but we're paying for it. Who's paying for it? The taxpayers.
We are paying for it. But do you want women not to be able to afford to have kids? Do you want women going back to work when they've got a 2-week-old?
Right. With me and my wife, our generation, I'm 70, 72.
Yeah.
Well, my wife, when we only had child benefit for 1 child, but I've had 2 children.
Yeah. Did your wife work?
Sorry?
Did your wife work when you had kids?
She always worked.
Yeah.
She always would. But what she did when we had the first child, Nicola, she went, if we had the kid, and then she went on school meals in the afternoon while the kid was in school. And then when the kid was going to school permanently, she got a better paid job. Yeah. This is what you should do in this country. You should be getting paid, for this nonsense.
But with all due respect on behalf of women, I mean, I had very, very difficult pregnancy. I needed a little bit of time off from work, but I also wanted to look after my child. And I saved up a hell of a load of money to afford. Most women, unless your company pays you extra, most women don't get enough money from the state to even pay their rent on maternity leave.
No, I understand that.
Do we not want people to be able to afford to have kids? People need to have a woman who's had a baby needs to have an income of some sort, doesn't she? Or are we just going to say don't have any kids?
You're joking. My wife's worked all her life, like same as me.
Yeah.
Well, you've got to work, but you've got people who'll sit back and have kids, and then they'll take the money, and that's
No, but what about the women who were? I paid a shed load of tax before I had a kid, and I was entitled to maternity leave, which I'd contributed to.
Well, exactly, but no, I'm not saying you shouldn't have kids. You're joking. We should have more kids.
Yeah, but women won't be able to have kids unless they can have maternity leave and spend time with their children, which is really, really important for children's well-being.
Yeah, yes, but then we got this new one. The dad who stayed at home while the mother went to work. It becomes ridiculous sometimes.
I'm not in favour of both parents being off. I mean, I find that. I mean, I find that a bit mad. But I understand your concern. That's the wrong area of my concern, and we differ on that one. And I so appreciate your call. Thank you very, very much indeed. Let's go to Laura Jane's now. Laura Jane is in Hampshire. And Laura, you want to talk about Liverpool and the information the police gave us.
Yes, I want to say that I was deeply ashamed of myself in the initial seconds when I was hearing it on the radio, because I yelled at the radio, "What about Southport?" immediately. I felt that it was a reverse racism on part of the police to tell us that
no such thing as reverse racism, it's just racism.
Yes, okay, you're right. Racism. I felt that it was it was just awful that we were told immeditised
that he was a white man. Why do you think they did that?
Because the police are politicised now. The whole thing is so politicised, and I'm absolutely sure there were conversations immediately with Number 10.
Yep.
There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes.
Yep.
Same as Southport. They didn't want everybody to know that young man indeed was a terrorist and was anti everything that we stand for.
Yes, he was obsessed with white genocide, wasn't he?
They just thought, well, we better tell everybody. I'm absolutely sure there's so much that goes on behind the scenes that we do not know about.
The Chief Constable of Merseyside Police gave evidence to a select committee, earlier this year, saying that she wanted to give out more information. It was the Crown Prosecution Service who stopped her giving out more information. I say I've been a news reporter for many years.
I know, but who's behind the Crown Prosecution?
Well, exactly. Someone who used to perhaps run it, the Director of Public Prosecutions, and now Prime Minister. Do you think that, final question to you. What do you think about the people who, when I said, we can only speculate why the police have chosen to give us this information, but don't in other attacks, about the ethnicity and the fact this man was from the Liverpool area, etc., and British national. Lots of people responding to me were saying, well, it's because bigots like you will have turned people and would speculate that it was a Muslim asylum seeker or a black man, and then there would be riots on the streets. What do you make of that response?
I think it's indicative of the state of our nation and the way that we have been, we are being taught to divide, to be divided. And I think that's one of the things that the Labour government wants to do, is to divide the nation. And I think those people themselves are bigots, because they're assuming that you are racist and assuming that you are bigoted. But
they assume a lot of us are.
What?
They assume a lot of us are.
Exactly. But I don't know enough about Twitters, etc. I'm of a certain age, and I assume that nowadays there are lots of bots, I think they call them. And I think that it's all a bit of a mirage, but I do feel that we are bringing up a generation, teaching them to be divided for political.
I couldn't agree with you more. Laura Jane, great call. Thank you much to all of our calls on that. 11:35 is time. We're going to take a quick break. Up next, we're going to talk about what is going on between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, the war of words over the weekend. Meanwhile, as the women, men and children in Ukraine die at the hands of Putin's bombs. We'll talk about that with Sean Bell up next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 11:37 is the time. Let's turn our attention right now to where we are with Ukraine, in particular, with relations between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump. We had an extraordinary war of words over the weekend where Donald Trump accused Vladimir Putin of going absolutely crazy. And now then we had Vladimir Putin sort of doing a war of words back, talking about how Donald Trump, well, Kremlin saying that Donald Trump was suffering from emotional overload. Well, let's talk about this with Sean Bell, who's a military and defence analyst. A very good morning to you.
Morning, Julia.
Thanks for joining us. Now, I mean, while people are dying, and again, so much focus has been on Gaza in recent months, but, you know, at the end of the day, we've got innocent men, women and children being targeted in blatant attacks on civilian areas and civilian structures by Russian forces. It seems a bit glib and silly to be talking about silly war of words between two egomaniacs, the Russian and the American president. But actually, when it comes to this international diplomacy and the attempts to get some sort of peace on the ground in Ukraine, it is going to come down to the relationship between these two men and the trust or lack of trust that is there. What did you make of that war of words?
Well, Julia, I think you capture it quite nicely. The danger is there is a war raging. Let's be quite clear that Russia is in the ascendancy at the moment. It's making advances on the front line. It is winning. And President Putin will feel emboldened at the moment because the sort of alliance of the willing helping Ukraine seems to be fragmenting with the US position. If I was a military advisor to Putin, I'd be saying push hard and keep going for now with the summer season of fighting ahead of us. I think what's really interesting, you quoted, you know, what Trump's been saying and Putin's been saying. What you didn't say was just after Putin talking about, you know, the emotional overload, they also, the Kremlin said, but we really thank President Trump for his efforts to try to enable a peace process, all of which I just become incredibly cynical. They're trying to play Donald Trump. And what I don't understand is why Trump, who in everything else goes hard and dirty first and then softens up a bit like
50%, yes, 50% tariffs on EU, yeah.
So why doesn't he do the same with this? Because he's forced President Zelensky to the table, yet he's only been nice to President Putin. If he was to impose 50% tariffs on every country that bought Russian oil, Russia's economy would collapse in a heartbeat and Russia would be forced to the table.
And that is the really, really frustrating thing, is that Donald Trump does have the power, and yet he's insisted since he came into office, well, before, since, and after that, and in and after that Oval Office meeting when he berated Zelensky, he kind of thinks that somehow Putin is the wronged soul and just accidentally found all of his men and all his weapons and tanks in Ukraine and just can't get out of it. And this poor man, and everyone's saying horrible things about him. I mean, it is utterly bizarre. A number of the things that he does say about what's going on there, for instance, like the millions of people being slaughtered. Again, too many people, but nowhere not even remotely resembling a million. And he a lot of his information he does seem to be getting from, the Kremlin bots on the internet, as opposed to from his actual State Department or his own sources. And this is the thing. He always goes in for an attack on Zelensky at every opportunity and usually avoids attacking Putin. Do you think there is any possibility at all in coming months that we are going to see Donald Trump doing some sort of deal with Putin which could safeguard the remaining unoccupied areas of Ukraine and guaranteeing that land, or that Vladimir Putin basically pushes it too far? Donald Trump has a wake-up eureka moment and realises that what he needs to do is to actually help the Ukrainians.
Yeah, there's a lot in there, isn't there, Julia? I mean, I do think, in principle, let's assume for a second that the leader of the free world is probably not a nutcase, that actually he genuinely has the right instincts, and they are to somehow bring the war to an end. And by somehow acting as some sort of intermediary, and actually, bluntly, America does have the power to do this, as we've just discussed. The trouble is at the moment, it feels like Trump is going along a long journey of just placating Putin and seems to be not aware of the implication that has. And therefore, going to your question, it doesn't appear that Trump is going to go hard and heavy against Putin. It seems more likely his attention will drift away. What we're seeing in Europe is that slight paranoia now that a vulnerable Ukraine becomes a vulnerable Europe. particularly if the US is not paying attention. And that's probably why we saw over the weekend this suggestion that European weapons now, the gloves have come off, the weapons can be used inside Russia as well.
And US, though, it's US, UK and EU weapons. They can use the long-range missiles. They're not going to be limited. Is that a significant sort of game changer for the Ukrainian forces, being able to then target weapons, silos and missiles on Russian territory?
Well, it's a great move forward, but I have to say, from a military perspective, almost certainly not going to be a game changer. Let's be quite clear over being able to strike Russian oil fields and stuff like that takes away some of Russia's ability to fund the war. But Ukraine's been very effective at generating its own long-range drones that have swarmed across and attacked these. I do think it's a key symbolic moment that Europe has recognised that we've got to do something else. We've run out of war stocks of stuff. You can't nip down to Sainsbury's and restock the war stocks. And therefore, what are we going to do? How do you stop Putin, particularly given that he feels emboldened, particularly the success he's enjoying on the battlefield at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, it has been interesting, Donald Trump saying, look, this is Putin's war, Zelensky's war, this is, this is Biden's war. It's kind of not my problem. And as you say, if he walks away, then it will become our problem. Can I ask you also about Russia's official denial of any involvement in those arson attacks linked to Keir Starmer? Arrests have been made, charges have been brought involving men from a variety of different countries. There has been some reports that counter-terror and other officers are looking into the possibility of there being some Russian link to people being possibly paid in some way to be linked to these attacks. So obviously, we have to be very careful with charges having been brought in some cases. But interesting that Russia has moved to publicly deny any involvement.
To be honest, Julia, when I heard this story, I laughed, because if you genuinely are going to have Russia targeting our Prime Minister or do some act somewhere in the UK, I think they'd do a lot better than simply setting fire to one of his residences. I think you could be a lot more decisive if you were going to do something like that. But
it has to be plausible deniability, doesn't it? It's just stirring trouble at the outskirts.
Yeah, but you can do a lot more stirring trouble with cyber by infiltrating different systems, by infiltrating defence, medical services, the like. Russia is infamous for spreading its tendrils in a number of different ways. So I don't know whether they were going about setting fire to one of the Prime Minister's residents, but bluntly, I think it's really unlikely. If they were going to have a go at us, they'd do it a lot more effectively.
Very interesting. Sean Bell, military and defence analyst, thank you very much indeed. Tom Slater, can I bring you back to the conversation more focusing on Ukraine? What did you make of this sort of, war of words, this sort of tit for tat, but clearly Russia, the Kremlin constantly trying to keep in Donald Trump's good books?
Well, I think they've clearly started to push their luck. I mean, for a long time, they were able to bank on what, in Trump's own words, was quite a warm relationship with Vladimir Putin. He said that in the past 48 hours. I've always gotten along with him.
They didn't want to end the phone call. They were having such a lovely chat.
Absolutely. So it's not Trump derangement syndrome to suggest that he's often had a bit of a soft spot for Vladimir Putin. But he's starting to realise that they're taking him for a bit of a mug. And that's the last thing that Donald Trump wants to be seen as a mug, as a sucker. And I think this is the point at which his patience is starting to break. It's interesting that he still feels the need to this kind of bizarre both sidesism. It's like Russia, they've really got to stop drone attacking all these Ukrainian cities. Zelensky, I don't like the words he's been using. So even that kind of
you really
betrays...
must stop defending your people.
Exactly, the ridiculousness of the both sides argument there. The trouble is that when it's difficult to work out what will happen next, because the sounds that you hear coming out from both Trump and JD Vance is, if they can't sort this out between themselves, we'll just back away, which is as good as just giving Putin a green light. So
this is why Putin is happy to just drag this on. He's hoping for summer offensive when he can gain more territory. So even if there were peace talks, he's got more territory. He knows there's not going to be a US guarantee. The only thing I suppose the Ukrainians, and indeed I say Europeans, who've got their heads screwed on straight, can hope for is that Donald Trump can turn on a dime on any issue. Yeah, absolutely. In which case he could just suddenly realise. And again, I think the main argument for most people is to make sure that he realises online and elsewhere that he's being taken for a fool and he's looking like the mug and everyone's laughing at you, Donald Trump. And by extension from that, laughing at America. We're laughing at America for not you've got to be the world's policeman. Yeah, I absolutely agree with him on things like Europeans need to step up. We need to pay for our own defence. But at the end of the day, if America doesn't want to be a serious country, and have a serious president, then you know, more for you, because it's going to backfire on America horribly. And you've seen developments again that's been going on between China and Taiwan over the weekend as well.
No, absolutely, and that's something which is another paradox of the Trump administration, because they want to put America first, but they also want to still be that global player.
Yeah.
And are they isolationists, or are they just being more savvy in terms of how they intervene?
I think you put America first by being the global player. I mean, you know, but there we are. We're going to take a quick break, and then we are going to be talking about, well, Boris Johnson, father of however many kids now, 9 I think officially. Could he possibly be back as Tory leader? Tory MPs have said, no, we don't want you, thank you very much. Meanwhile, the Tories are signalling that they are ready to pull out of the European Convention on Human Rights. But is Nigel Farage right in the speech the Reform UK leader has been making the last half an hour, saying that people won't trust the Tories ever again? This is Talk.
A sign of something deeper and darker in the Macrons' very unusual marriage.
It's a good headline, it's a good question, but you were saying
it is.
Sorry.
If, and there is a big if, this is an assault, this is domestic violence. Domestic violence is a very, very serious matter, whether it is committed by a man upon a woman or a woman upon a man. Never stay in an abusive relationship. Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Morning, this is Julia Hartley-Brewer at Talk, the home of common sense. Delighted to welcome Andrew Allison to the show. He's head of campaigns at the Popular Conservatism Group and joins us to talk about what is going on with the Tories right now. Very good morning to you, Andrew.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. It's particularly apposite on the day that, actually at the moment, while Reform UK leader Nigel Farage is speaking, basically not just parking his tanks on Tories' lawn, as we've seen, but also on Labour's lawn as well, in terms of some of the policies. But I just want to talk to you, first of all, just about the Tories signalling that they are ready to pull out of the European Convention on Human Rights. This after 9 European leaders have basically criticised the ECHR for preventing the deportation of foreign criminals. We know this is a huge issue, the Rwanda policy and others, and the issue of illegal asylum seekers in the UK ahead of the last general election, a big factor in the Tories losing the election. It's going to be a big factor that's pulling down the Labour support as well, and a big boon for Reform UK. But is leaving the ECHR and this announcement that we're expected to see, is that going to be a game changer?
I don't know whether it'll be a game changer, Julia, but it is the right decision. From time to time, we've done about 8 or 9 of these. We do opinion panel surveys amongst PopCon supporters. And more than 85% of our supporters believe that the Conservatives should pledge to leave the ECHR and scrap the Human Rights Act. Yeah. And it's a pretty good barometer for Conservative grassroots opinion. So it certainly will be a popular move within the party. And of course, as the recent local elections have highlighted, the Conservative Party and the Labour Party, of course, is losing support to reform. Yeah. But the Conservative Party certainly needs to win back those previous Conservative voters who voted for reform. Yeah. Now, whether they will do that with this policy, I doubt that they will, but it's going to have to be a whole raft of different policies as we head towards the next general election.
I mean, we've been discussing the ECHR and leaving that convention, leaving the European Court for Human Rights is, also persists for so many years now. But the reality is we've now got such a politicised judiciary. I'm not sure that would make any difference anyway, because we're saying we have to leave because they keep using, Article 8, the right to a family and private life, to keep people in the country because they're Albanian and their son doesn't like Albanian nuggets, or they're a paedophile, but they'll miss seeing their children, and their children will lose that because they're here. But the reality is actually these are just absurd misinterpretations. They're not different. They're misinterpretations of the articles of the Human Rights Convention. And if they went back to the how it used to be interpreted 20 or 30 years ago, we wouldn't have an issue.
No, that's correct, Julia, and there has to be wholesale reform of the way that we do things in this country. We tend to be run by quangos and by committees and by judges. I mean, my colleague Mark Littlewood, I think he said it to you once, that if you want to change immigration policy in this country, you're far better off becoming a judge than you are a cabinet minister.
Yes.
And he's completely correct in that. So that all of that has to change. And those people who say, well, if we pull out of the ECHR, we'll be like Russia or Belarus. Well, we're not like Russia or Belarus.
It's nonsense.
We've got a proud history of defending human rights.
By the way, Europe only has human rights because of us. You're welcome.
Well, precisely. And the ECHR was formulated immediately after the Second World War, which was a response to the genocide of the Second World War. Yeah. So times have moved on.
Can I just say what a pleasure it is to have someone use the word genocide correctly on my show. It's so unusual these days in the news, isn't it? Can I also talk to you about, the threat from Reform UK? Nigel Farage, he's talking about bringing in tax breaks for married couples, help them have more kids. We need to have more. I think there are other things that would work better. Build more houses is the number one thing that will solve every problem in this country. He's also talking about reinstating the winter fuel allowance for all pensioners. That would be a very popular policy with a lot of people. But also scrapping the two-child benefit cap. Now, that doesn't seem to me to be a Nigel Farage-esque policy at all. I think they're insane to do that. I've yet to find any of my audience who think that's a good idea. Why do you think he's announcing that?
If you look back at the last local elections, which were a disaster for my party, the Conservative Party, but look at Durham, traditionally a Labour heartland where I was born and brought up, Labour were reduced to 4 seats out of 98 on Durham County Council. That is how low that Labour has fallen. And Nigel Farage and Reform are clearly trying to make a play for the left and for the right. Now, how successful they're going to be in doing that, time will only tell. But for every supporter that you may pick up on the left by announcing those policies, you are going to lose supporters from the right.
And they've got the same thing. And again, your party is the same thing. Like, you try and get those reform voters, you lose your Lib Demi side of things. And it isn't. We had a caller earlier saying, look, I've voted reform because I think it was Alan saying, he's moving left, and I voted reform because I wanted someone to the right of the current Conservative Party, which is basically the Lib Dems. Let me ask you about who might be a leader who could get those voters in. Kemi Badenoch, as she took over the party, the party's gone down in the polls, and we're looking at the Tories fourth in one of the latest YouGov polls, with Reform out top, below the Lib Dems. You can think of anything more demeaning than that. There's been a lot of talk, the Daily Mail's obsessed with this, bringing Boris Johnson back. Oh, wouldn't he do amazingly? I don't know how he's got time between changing nappies, given he's on his, I think, 9th child that we're allowed to know about anyway, that he's now a father to. And congratulations to him and Carrie. I'm all in favour of people having more babies who can afford them. He doesn't need a benefit cap for him. But Conservative MPs have basically said, no, there is no appetite to bring Boris Johnson back. Thank you very much. Do you agree?
Yes, frankly. If you look at some of the major issues that we face today, and net migration is one of them. Sure, the figures came down to, I think, 433,000. Yep. It was announced last week, which incidentally is still around about 100,000 higher than it was when we had the referendum to leave the EU. Yep. And that was regarded as too high then. But if you look at the time when Boris Johnson was Prime Minister, the figures just rose exponentially. Yeah. And if you also look at net zero,
the Boris boom, I believe, yeah. Boris wave, the Boris wave of legal
Boris wave,
migrants.
I think it was.
Yeah.
Yes, wave of migrants. But also, if you look at net zero, which is another policy that is unpopular amongst those who are right of centre, Conservative voters, Reform
people who can
voters.
count.
people who can count as well, Julie. That's a very good point. But if you look at that particular policy, who was the major champion of it? And that was Boris Johnson. I think Boris Johnson, the idea that he's somehow or other the exiled king across the water waiting to return to claim his throne is for the birds, and I can't see that happening at all.
I couldn't agree with you more on that. Andrew Allison, Head of Campaigns at Popular Conservatism, thank you very much for joining us. Tom Slater, the ECHR and Boris Johnson returning, have you answered the Tory woes?
Well, it does show what a hole that they're in at the moment. I mean, if
scrabbling around,
if Boris Johnson is the answer, you're probably asking the wrong question. At the very least, they haven't been able to move on. I mean, any possible benefit he might bring because of the charisma, the cut through, the fact that there's still a portion of society who've got warm things to say about him.
There are three party leaders on for the Tories since Boris. That's how many there have been.
Any benefit he might bring would obviously be cancelled out by the tremendous negative that he would also represent because of lockdown, because of Partygate, because of all these different things, because of immigration. So I think this is a party which is completely run out of ideas, and so is revisiting some failed ideas that they've gone to in the past.
Do you think the problem is Kemi Badenoch, or is the problem the party? She keeps making the point that, look, you know, voters are still angry with us. Nigel Farage this morning has said in his speech that people won't trust the Tories again.
I think who is the leader of the Conservative Party at this point is almost totally, irrelevant. It could be Mr. Blobby, and it would make absolutely no difference one way or the other. The idea that if it was Robert Jenrick who was chosen last year rather than Kemi Badenoch, that he would have cut through to such a significant degree, I just don't buy it. And I think that people pay too much attention sometimes to the kind of internal ideological battles within the Tory Party rather than where the public are at, which is that they see the Tory Party as kind of half kind of busted flush, but also people who have been in power for a long time, pledged to do things, and then did the precise opposite. And a change of the leadership isn't necessarily going to overcome that anytime soon, I don't think.
Yeah, indeed. And we saw, after the Labour Party got in 97, it was just change of leader after change of leader. I think every summer I did as a political editor yet another leadership election. I think we may be in that territory again. We shall wait and see. Love to hear your thoughts on that. Coming up after midday, I'm so delighted to have in the studio Andrew Doyle, absolutely brilliant campaigner on all things sane. He's the author of a brand new book, The End of Woke, How the Culture War Went Too Far and What to Expect from the Counter-Revolution. As part of the Counter-Revolution, I can't wait to speak to him. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Great to have your company, and whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, it is an absolute pleasure for you to join us. I hope for you as well as it is for me. Lots and lots to talk about. Still lots of calls, and I do want to get to those calls coming up about the car that ploughed into a crowd of Liverpool fans celebrating their team's Premier League title last night. 47 people injured, children among those, 4 children taken to hospital. Now, police investigating the ramming in Liverpool city centre are not treating the incident as terrorism. They did, though, say that a 53-year-old white British man from the Liverpool area was arrested at the scene. Now, a lot of people are asking about why they felt the need to put some of those details in, not in normal statements about any suspect who has been arrested. Your thoughts on that? Very welcome. Also, we're talking about what Reform UK leader Nigel Farage right now is announcing at a press conference. He's talking about a £5 billion pitch aimed at Labour's heartlands. He's parked his tanks on their lawn, as well as the Tories vowing to scrap the 2-child benefit cap. Not going down well with my audience, and certainly not with me so far. But restoring the winter fuel allowance for all pensioners, that'll be a very popular move, and giving tax breaks for married couples to encourage more families to have more kids. We'd support that, wouldn't we? Plus, we'll talk about Kosovo saying it's open to the idea of becoming a return hub for failed UK asylum seekers. That assumes we actually process any and fail any of them. But the president of Kosovo, President Osmani, said her country would welcome discussions. This follows Albania rejecting the return hub scheme that Keir Starmer was suggesting, while Keir Starmer was standing next to the president of Albania. That went down terribly well. Anyway, that is all coming up. But I'm delighted to say, before then, we are joined in the studio, Tom Slater, editor of Spiked Online, and myself, by the wonderful, the brilliant, my good friend, Andrew Doyle. He's author of a brilliant new book. I'll hold it up for you. It's called The End of Woke: How the Culture War Went Too Far and What to Expect from the Counter-Revolution. A very, very warm welcome to you, Andrew.
Lovely to be here.
Just point out that you were for many years on a rival broadcaster, so we weren't allowed to ever talk to each other on each other's shows, which we've been waiting to do. And I'm very, very, very pleased that you're here talking about your new book. First question I want to ask you, though, is that you've been an amazing campaigner against the madness we've seen on woke, on every sphere, way ahead of the party than a lot of people who've jumped on the bandwagon later on. And you've been really influential for me in terms of my thinking on this, and really thoughtful on this stuff. Calling a book The End of Woke.
Yes.
Is that a little bit over-optimistic right now?
A bit premature, maybe. Well, I mean, there is an implied question mark there.
Is there? I can't see it. I'm looking. No, unless it's slipped off in the edit, I can't see it.
It's aspirational, I suppose, rather than a prophecy. I'm not trying to say that I definitely know for sure. I'm suggesting or making the argument that so many major things have happened that the woke movement, as we've known it, is coming to an end. There's too many things. There's the Supreme Court ruling saying that biological sex in the Equality Act means biological sex. There's the Cass review, which led to the puberty blockers being banned. We've had DEI being stripped out of major corporations across the world. The election of Trump and him saying, with these executive orders regarding no more men in women's prisons, no more men in women's sports. All of this stuff, I think, is just too seismic for the genie to go back in the bottle. I think woke is dying. I'm not saying that people aren't pushing back. Just this week we had Lady Hale saying she's been speaking to doctors who tell her there's no such thing as biological sex. So we had that.
I mean, I don't ever want to go to those doctors.
No, I mean,
we haven't had all the hospitals, all the organisations, even Parliament saying we're not going to obey, the Supreme Court ruling on single-sex basis.
And isn't that incredible that these people are posting online saying, declaring their intention to break the law.
Good luck with that.
Good luck when the court cases happen, because you've just announced your intention to do it.
Here's my thing is, though, we have seen, authoritarianism. We have seen cancel culture on steroids.
We have.
The policing of our language, of these. We've seen the most outrageous, I would say, racism, misogyny against women, and by BLM and all of that stuff. You say, okay, it's the end. There's it kind of over it. They kind of, grew a little bit too big. They got a little bit too big for their boots, and people are pushing back. Is there going to be any for want of a better word, punishment for those people? Because it seems to me, for instance, even like the hospital boss who says, oh, we're going to not have single-sex wards, we're not going to have single-sex changing rooms for nurses. They never get punished. They might lose the court case, and the taxpayer will pick up the tab for their legal fees and their fine or whatever, but no one ever gets sacked on that side of the argument. No one ever loses their job. I agree with you, Julia. They absolutely should be sacked. I mean, we've had children who have been put onto medicalisation, pathways to irreversible surgery, on the basis of what? This kind of pseudo-religious belief in a gendered soul. I mean, that's absolutely absurd. Every single one of those people needs to be in prison. Lives ruined, right? Absolutely, as you say. I mean, when the police turned up at the hospital where a woman had been sexually assaulted on a ward and said, we need to investigate this, the staff at the NHS said, that's not possible because there were no men on this ward. And that was official NHS policy. They had to deny the truth. Trans woman, i.e. a trans-identified man who was sexually assaulted, raped a female patient. Exactly. So that's, I mean, it's so serious. I mean, we talk about the frivolous stuff like the pronouns and Lady Hale saying something stupid at this literary festival. But there are really, really serious points here. Children who have been mutilated, adults who are detransitioners now who are now regretting it, and women's spaces eroded. We've had men actually moved from a men's prison to the female estate and have gone on in some cases to sexually assault further women. Lives have been destroyed. All the stuff that we're told never happens. Exactly, but because it sounds so preposterous, I think a lot of people didn't believe it for a long time. You know, if you say there are rapists in female prisons, people say, what, that can't be true, and they just don't believe it. So there should be consequences. I've asked MPs, how many men do you think are in women's prisons in England? Like, no, I know of at least 2. They've no idea. Minimum of 2, but they don't. Yes, if you call them women, then no one knows of it. Okay, here's the thing. There have been plenty of books written about woke. Yes. And people, and look, we talk about this stuff, and you did in your previous show about this stuff all the time. What's different about this book? What are you saying that's different? Well, because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to explore what a post-woke world will look like. Now, what I'm saying is... We don't just go back to where we were. No, exactly. What I'm talking about is how we need to be vigilant in terms of looking out for the signs that that kind of identity-obsessed authoritarianism might return, because it might, because the woke are very adept at changing language, returning in a new guise, you know, just shifting the dialogue. You know, I'll give you an example. When there's a recent case where the College of Policing, who, as we know, introduced non-crime hate incidents, they've now said, well, we might change what it's called, because clearly that's the problem, rather than the fact that the police are investigating people for non-crime, which should never happen anyway. It's basically hate speech. Yeah, hate speech, exactly. So my fear is that we have, with woke in retreat, it's leaving a kind of vacuum, and I'm arguing that authoritarianism is actually the default in humanity, and it will emerge from one form or another. It could come from the right, it could come from the left. Okay, but the people who've been pushing woke, they think that they're liberals. They describe them, they're kind people and nice people. These are the people who've been hounding people out of a job, out of a career, comedians particularly, and you've been a stand-up comic for many years and a comedy writer, hounding people. I mean, Graham Linehan, you know, one of the most leading award-winning comedy writers, hounded out of his career for saying the wrong thing. These are the nice people. It's always difficult to remember that. But these people, they think that they are the liberals. We are the nasty, horrible, right-wing authoritarians. They're the nice people. Andrew. Well, yeah, I mean, their slogan may as well be kind or else. You know, it's very much a kind of threat in everything they do. They're not liberal, they're the opposite. They are anti-liberal, because it's not liberal to impose your values on everyone else by force. It's not liberal to set up a retributive system of public shaming called cancel culture, to ruin people's lives, denigrate their reputations, trash them online so they can never work again. Graham Linehan, you mentioned, a very good example. He's one of the best comedy writers in the world, hasn't been able to work in the industry for 6 years. It's not liberal to disagree with someone and therefore punish, shame and censor them. It's the opposite. I've always said the best synonym for woke is anti-liberal. Just because they call themselves liberal doesn't make them liberal any more than the fact that North Korea calls itself democratic. You know, it's exactly what you were saying about, you know, the language. They change the meanings of words and deny that they're changing. What a woman is and yes, everything. And or what inclusion and what racism is. And that's the interesting thing. When did they kind of try and blow the bubble gum up too big, and when did it burst really? Because I'm thinking about 2020 was when this was still going on. I mean, certainly the trans issue and sort of the anti-racism, critical race series stuff in the States was happening in the early teens, around 2012ish. It all exploded into madness in 2020 during lockdown. You'd think people would have had better things to do with their time, but apparently they didn't. Yeah. And we had Prime Minister now, as leader of the opposition, kneeling. We had police officers kneeling for Black Lives Matter, and we've had the explosion of what's happened in our schools with the pronouns and all the trans woke stuff. Nicola Sturgeon. I mean, what was the point when they just went a little bit too far and exposed themselves, and the little boy shouted, "But the Emperor's not got any clothes on"?
Well, there were a number of things. I mean, as you mentioned, the summer of 2020, the death of George Floyd, Black Lives Matter exploding, and everyone going along with it because of the language. No one wants to disagree with the phrase Black Lives Matter, because of course they do. No one wants to disagree with anti-racism because it sounds great, but actually what anti-racism was a new form of racism. Yeah. Similarly, you know, trans women are women. The thing is, because ultimately they were denying truth, because ultimately they were saying that it is possible for a human being to change sex when even a 4-year-old knows that it isn't. Yeah. You know, they were actually asking us to believe things that are palpably false. Once we got to the point where, for instance, at the American school in London, one of the most expensive day schools in the UK, when they were segregating children by skin colour for after-school activities, you see that and you think,
because they were nice.
Yeah, because they were being you think, didn't we leave that behind? Didn't we have that argument and win that argument that actual racial segregation is a bad thing? But they were trying to bring this stuff back. So I think what happens is people eventually see through the language. They do go too far. They have jumped the shark. Yeah. Huge. I mean, particularly with the trans activist protesters claiming to be compassionate, and then you let them speak and hear what they've got to say. They're posting rape threats and death threats. They've, you know, so much so that 2 Scottish politicians stood in front of a placard at a protest with a guillotine on it saying "decapitate TERFs." And they didn't even notice because it was so normal, right? So this is not a compassionate movement by any stretch.
But that's the thing. But the thing is, it never took over most people's brains. No. I mean, when Keir Starmer says, you know, 99.9% of women don't have a penis, but then by leaving basically 30,000 women in this country apparently having a penis. I said, we've done a weekly check on my show, still haven't got one. My audience take part, we have a quick look, no, still haven't got one. And then miraculously there's a Supreme Court decision, and suddenly apparently he doesn't think that any women have a penis, because trans women are not women, they're men, because women are a biological sex that's different from men. So he didn't know that one day, and then the next day he did. But most people, as you say, all knew that, whether they were, you know, 4 years old or 80 years old. And a lot of these things, people know that, you know, that a lot of this stuff is mad. But it wasn't something that most people believed.
No, in fact, it's
so why was able to take hold so much and be imposed on everybody? So everybody had to do these. I mean, even in our office, hello HR, have to do these. Have to do these god-awful things about, well, how would you speak to a trans person? Yes. You know, I speak to a trans person the same way I'd speak to anyone else in my office. Well, I tell them to do their job properly.
I think it's because they're scary, right? Because they were frightening. I mean, one of the cheering things is, I mean, one of the statistics I quote in the book is the More in Common initiative study, which found that at its height, the woke movement was only ever supported by between 8 and 10% of the population.
But they were the people in power.
They were in charge.
They were running the companies. Exactly. Running the universities.
It was top down. It was imposed by the elite.
Okay, but why did all the really clever people, we keep being told they're the clever people.
Yeah.
Why did the clever people believe stuff that's blatantly stupid and untrue?
Well, for one thing, because I don't believe all of them did believe it. I think they knew that it was expedient, and it put them in positions of power and clout in order to propagate this stuff.
Had to pretend to believe it.
Yes, but also they were frightened. They were afraid, because there have been so many examples. I mean, look, J.K. Rowling cannot be cancelled because she's too powerful. Yeah. But people see the threats she gets online, the treatment that she gets, that, you know, she didn't have to stick her neck out. She's an absolute hero for doing this, as far as I can see. But,
do you think any of her stars in the Harry Potter films actually believe this nonsense they spout?
Of course not. But they joined in implicitly, didn't they?
They are hateful.
And the thing is, you know, people see that, and it sets an example. I mean, those activists knew they couldn't cancel J.K. Rowling, but they knew they wanted to set an example for anyone else who could speak out of turn. And there were people who did get cancelled who weren't as well known as she was.
Well, we know also in the Free Speech Union, we're both supporters of them, that they something like 40% of their cases are people, men and women, are saying, no, I don't believe that a man can become a woman. I mean, the most blatantly easy, unreasonable, you know, but unquestionable statements that no one would have questioned a few years ago.
Yes.
Why do you think some people weren't cowed? I was always of the view, there's just stuff I'm not willing to pretend I believe.
Yes.
There's stuff which... Ofcom, I mean, you know this, having worked at a rival broadcaster. Ofcom has rules about, like, you know, about using, you know... I mean, I see the newspapers. I find it extraordinary that national newspapers will refer to someone who is a trans-identifying man as she, because that's his preferred pronoun, in a rape trial. I find that extraordinary. I will never do that, and have never done that.
No, but you're principled, and this is the point.
And you are, but you've stood up for comedy as well.
But I mean, that fascinates fascinates me because if you look at the guidelines from the press regulator and indeed Ofcom, it at no point says that journalists have to misrepresent the sex of a rapist. They don't have to do it. It's a choice that has been made, often by editorial style guides, often by journalists themselves. I don't do it because I don't think you should. I think you should need to be accurate.
You're misleading people.
You can say what you want in your own private life, but if you're reporting in the news, you have to be accurate. And actually, Ofcom makes clear that accuracy is really, really important. So that really surprises me, as you say, that more people went along with it. And I think it just goes to show that human beings are really susceptible to this kind of hysteria.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, Lionel Shriver wrote a novel about the mania. This has been a mania. OK, so you are optimistically... But go back to the book again. The end of woke.
Optimistic,
you have thought so deeply about all of this. You've done lots of articles and things about this and podcasts and the like. So you're saying... We talked about how the culture war went too far.
Yes.
Okay? What to expect from the counter-revolution? Have we got the counter-revolution? Is Donald Trump? Is J.K. Rowling? Are you a part of the counter-revolution? And what should we expect?
Well, the point is that I don't think you will ever solve this problem, that authoritarianism will always emerge somewhere.
What do you mean by authoritarianism?
What I mean is people who don't have any room for the marketplace of ideas, people who believe that what they say goes.
You can't say that.
Exactly. To suggest that this only comes from the left is very historically myopic. That's just the last 15 years. But remember, when I was a kid, it was mostly right-wing papers saying, ban this film, censor this film. Now
nipples. Mary Whitehouse and nipples.
Mary Whitehouse. There's a whole bit on Mary Whitehouse in the book. Exactly. God love her. But, the point is that it can come from anywhere. I'm seeing more and more signs that there's a kind of white identitarianism on the right really emerging, sort of Hitler memes, neo-fascist. So to suggest that it's just the left that can go too far is not right.
Well, that's one of the problems. If you call everyone right-wing bigoted and a fascist and like Hitler, and then they'll go, OK, let's play.
Well, there's that, but there's also, if you say for 15 years that you must think of yourselves in terms of your group identity, not in terms of you as an individual, of course white nationalists are going to do that. So now they've laid the groundwork for a pushback that could be even worse from another angle. I mean, I'm not saying it will happen. I'm saying that it could happen from any direction. We have to just be vigilant.
Did lockdown teach us quite a lot? Because I think a lot of us were really quite shocked by... I mean, again, I supported early on some measures, but early on, and again, and it was actually... I mean, Tom Slater's still with us in the studio. We'll come to you, you and Brendan Owen and others who were fighting against this from word go, saying this is a bad idea. I foolishly was convinced by, the medical and scientific advice that we were told. It was all made up, all absolute nonsense. And I'm still, to this day, angry as hell about this, but the public lapped it up. Yes, we were very scared. There was a lot of propaganda to make us more scared than we should have been, certainly for younger people. But even with polling later on, when things had emerged, most people would have met somebody who had COVID and had a bit of a sniffle or hadn't even had a symptom, and we knew who was dying from COVID, and it was largely, very sadly, but older people, who often die of other things at the same age. Let's be realistic. But people, when there were polls like, do you want nightclubs to be closed? Do you want, reopened? Never. I mean, like 70% of people or something said they never want any nightclub reopened. People are really, really big on having laws and restrictions on what other people can do and what other people can say, as long as it's people who are not like them.
Yeah, and doesn't that suggest that actually a lot of people don't really like freedom all that much? I mean, you're absolutely right. Spike has been completely consistent on this. And the problem is that study that you mentioned, I think it was in The Economist, where people said they wanted permanent curfews, even if it was determined that the virus had been completely eliminated. So people quite like the idea of being put in these blinkers and these tramwells. People like the idea of outsourcing their individual agency. I tell you why, because I think thinking for yourself is quite hard, and we all sort of yearn to go back into the womb in a way, have some sort of parent sort of deciding for us. But that's not the role of the state. We should be able to make our own decisions. We should be able to have our own freedom. What woke did is that it completely destabilised our sense of freedom, our sense of liberty, and the fact that we fought for freedom of speech.
It didn't just happen,
and it doesn't just stay there forever. You've got to keep fighting for it, because there's always going to be someone trying to take it away.
But this is the thing. I mean, the censorship at university, and again, some of the the demonstrations at universities that are going on at the moment as well. I absolutely find it extraordinary. It wouldn't have occurred to me when I was at uni, in the olden days, as my daughter would say, that anyone would ever say you can't say that to someone.
Crazy. I mean, I talk in the book about when I was at university, I used to have these rows with friends late in the night, drinking too much, having a row, but still being friends at the end of it, saying, it's okay, you can disagree with me politically and we're not going to fall out or call each other fascists. That is the before times. Woke came along and completely obliterated that.
And that was a left thing. That wasn't me. That was a 60s liberal, lefty kind of thing. what can my audience do? What can I do? What can people here who do care about freedom? I think this has been a really big part of what this station has been about. It's about freedom of speech, and it's about empowering individuals, but also just being accurate. I mean, really believe in the accuracy of, you know, whether it's lockdown, whether it's net zero, but challenging an awful lot of the, you know, the establishment views. But I mean, now I'm of the view, if everyone agrees, you know, thinks one thing, I'm thinking, yeah, there's going to be something behind this, because they've been so wrong on so much in recent years. What can we as individuals do to ensure that the counter-revolution gets us back or forward to a place where people can express themselves freely and safely, and we have the exchange of ideas, the marketplace of ideas, and we get to defeat bad ideas with good ideas, as opposed to shutting down ideas?
It's a combination of a couple of things. I think firstly, humility is really important. We should all remember that we're all going to be wrong about a lot of things at any given time, and we have something to learn from our critics. That's the first thing. So just silencing a critic isn't going to be helpful to yourself, even from a purely selfish point of view. The other thing is, I think we just need to be a bit braver. I think the woke movement lasted for as long as it did because, as you say, people weren't principled, people weren't standing up for it for good reason, because they could destroy your life. But there is safety in numbers. The majority of people do believe in good old-fashioned liberal values, you know, giving everyone a fair shot and being able to speak your mind. And having the courage to say things, and you might be wrong, and being able to admit, oh, I got that wrong, but maybe I'm right about this. And, you know, just these seem really basic first principles, don't they?
You'd
but
never have had to explain this. 20 years ago, you would have had to explain this.
You should have to write a book saying that free speech matters, but I did that, didn't I? Because you know, that shouldn't have to be written.
Absolutely.
It's bizarre. Like Sharon Davis shouldn't have had to write a book saying that men shouldn't be in women's sports. But here we are, stating the obvious.
We had a Supreme Court ruling that was dozens of pages long, telling us that women are women.
Except in Australia, the judge ruled that sex is changeable.
We're waiting for the Supreme Court ruling on that. Tom Slater, I know that you've worked very closely with Andrew Doyle, and you've got an event tomorrow night in Parliament as well with him. I mean, it is extraordinary. You've had to write any of this, but do you think we are at the end of woke?
I think Andrew's absolutely right that we're at the end of that particularly awful phase where all of these ridiculous left-wing, allegedly identity politics ideas suddenly captured people in positions of huge power. You had CEOs of banks taking the knee. You had Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer taking the knee, which was an incredible feat both politically and physically, given the age of those politicians. But it was a moment in which this very small minority political faction managed to capture the ear of people in power. That phase is definitely over. I think the populist wave has put paid to that. I think ordinary people, through voting the wrong way in various points, have shoved the Overton window very firmly in the other direction. But as you make the point in the book, Andrew, it doesn't mean that these ideas go away. And every liberal thinker ever has made the point that the responsibility of freedom is constant vigilance and trying to push back against authoritarianism, whatever form it comes in.
And
so
again,
it's never over.
I've never understood this idea of like, don't say that. No, say it, and then we know that you've said it. We know what you think, and we can argue with you about why that's right. Like Holocaust denial. No, if someone doesn't think the Holocaust happened, let's have a debate about that, and we'll give you the evidence and prove to you why you're wrong.
And let people out themselves. You know, don't lock them up or censor them. I want to know who those people are. You know, I want to know who the worst people in society are. So let them speak. Absolutely.
Well, one of the best people in society are people who fight for freedom of speech, and Andrew Doyle is among them. Andrew, it's such a pleasure and an honour to have you in the studio. Author of this brilliant book, The End of Woke. He says there's an implied question mark. There isn't. The End of Woke, How the Culture War Went Too Far, and What to Expect from the Counter-Revolution. Up the masses, eh? We'll take a quick break. Up next, we're going to be talking more about the horrible events at that victory parade in Liverpool. This is Talk.
Police have arrested a 53-year-old white man at the scene after a car was seen driving into a number of pedestrians here on, it was actually on Water Street. I'm on Dale Street at the moment in the centre of Liverpool, very close to the docks. The Liver building is just at the end of this road, and actually everybody was here. We think around 1 million people on the streets of Liverpool celebrating Liverpool Football Club's Premier League trophy and the huge parade today. Shockingly, at around 7 p.m, we had this news that filtered through the crowd.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good afternoon to you. Welcome back to the show. Thank you very much. A big thanks to Andrew Doyle for joining us. Tom Slater is staying with us. And let's talk right now to Roy Ram. He's the former commander of Specialist Operations at New Scotland Yard, and talk about these horrific events last night in Liverpool at the very tail end of that amazing victory parade, full of happiness and joy and laughter and family fun, celebrating the Premier League victory, which turned to horror when a car ploughed into people. 47 people hurt, 27 of those needing hospital treatment, 4 people trapped under a car, including a child, and 4 children among those who were taken to hospital. Thankfully, and goodness knows how, nobody has died as a result. But a man, a 53-year-old man, described by the police as a white British man from the Liverpool area, has been arrested. Roy Ram, first of all, just what did you make of I'm using the word attack because that's what it would have felt like to the people who suddenly had a car rammed into them. But the fact that a driver of a car was able to be within what was clearly an area that was supposed to be pedestrianised for this parade, and able to cause such horrific devastation and tragedy.
Yeah, I just preface my remarks by sharing your concerns and the tragedy of the event and the trauma that everybody involved in it has gone through. And as you rightly say, we're very lucky that nobody died. I think it kind of flags up the difficulties that police forces have in closing off cities for large events. I mean, we've seen it before at the Notting Hill Carnival and other very big events where you've got hundreds of thousands of people on the streets. Cities are very difficult to close off. And, I guess the police in Merseyside will be looking to see if they could have done more to put the barriers up, etc., if they'd have been strong enough. But, the simple fact remains is that this man got into a road in this vehicle, and it ended up being, I choose my words carefully, but like a weapon. And once it goes down the road at that pace, you're talking about something that weighs a couple of tons. Yeah. It is more dangerous than a firearm.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen this being done deliberately in the past in terror attacks, not just in Britain, but across Europe as well. I think understandably an awful lot of people's first concern, I imagine it would have been of the police. I mean, you were in Special Operations in New Scotland Yard. I would have thought the first thought was this may well be a terror attack, and modus operandi chosen by Islamist extremisms. That would have been the obvious first thought for anyone. Not racist or bigoted for anyone to think, it might be someone who's motivated by Islamist extremism. We're told by the police in a very detailed press conference about 11 o'clock last night that they do not believe there is a terror motive. They are not searching for anyone else, and that this man had been arrested. We haven't had a charge brought as yet. Of course, lots of it was caught on video, lots of different angles, lots of people at the scene as well. But were the police right to release details in which they said he was a 53-year-old white British man who had been arrested in connection with this? I mean, the white and the British. I've looked at Merseyside Police's previous announcements, their tweets and others about various different arrests they've made and charges they've brought in the last month on social media. They never mentioned the colour of the skin or the nationality of the person. Why did they do so in this case?
Yeah, Julian, I think if you look beyond Merseyside and look at police announcements generally, there is a great reluctance to describe ethnicity in particular.
It's irrelevant.
Well, yeah, it is. But in this particular case, if you look at what happened after Southport, where there were assumptions made by a lot of people that turned out to be completely wrong, I think Merseyside police were absolutely terrified that people were going to assume that this was Islamic terrorism, that there was a particular ethnic group who was sitting behind this. And, you had this huge crowd of people who were emotionally invested in the day, and I hate to think what might have happened if that had kind of suspicion had run through social media and people had come to the wrong conclusion. So I think in this particular case it was absolutely the right decision to take.
That's very interesting, because we were told in select committee hearings, Chief Constable of Merseyside back in January, she claimed that she wanted to give out more information that was given out about Axel Rudikabana in the immediate aftermath of his arrest on the 29th of July last year of the Southport attacks, but it was the CPS that advised them not to, and even when he was charged, not as much information given out as we've had here within hours. I mean, this was given out, very, very quickly.
Very quickly.
But so what is the concern? So the idea is that if people think it's a black, Asian or Muslim man or an immigrant, we're immediately all going to go on the streets and riot, because it seems to me that what happened to Post-Southport, the riots weren't until the evening after the information had gone out that it was a man from Cardiff, born in Britain. But the key thing was, it was the lack of information and the feeling that information was being kept from us deliberately. And indeed, it was later, because we were not told about the ricin being found or the terror manual, the Al-Qaeda terror manual, when we were told repeatedly this was not a terror-related incident. And he wasn't charged until some months later in October with ownership of those items, which were possessing that manual is a terror-related crime.
Yeah, no, I get that, and I absolutely understand the distinction that you're making and the concerns that you're articulating. But look, what you had here were dozens of people, hundreds of people with smartphones who were filming the incident. So there wasn't much doubt that it was a white guy, driving the car of a certain age. And I think the confirmation of that was legitimate. But I do think that you're right, and I share your concern that we shouldn't be saying, well, this time around it was a white guy, don't worry about it.
That was the implication, wasn't it?
No, I get it. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah, and that's the concern, isn't it? What information should be given out? I was saying to you earlier on, I was a news reporter, used to cover court cases, and you'd write about a case and you knew what you could or couldn't write when arrest had been made or charges were imminent or what, and there's detail you can put in the local paper and there's stuff you sometimes do have to put in. If someone's name is, say, John Smith, and you say, John Smith of Brookland Avenue, and there's two John Smiths in Brookland Avenue, you could be sued by the other John Smith. So, you have to give more detail to make sure you're not being sued for libel by someone else. I mean, there's lots of information that can be given out. Do you think the police largely get it right, or do you think actually there's a lot of pressure that goes on behind the scenes politically from the CPS, from who we kid in government, even with the Southport riots? Look, the government was saying, nothing to do with us, Gov, policing is up to the police leaders. But the Prime Minister's gone on telly, and so is the Home Secretary, saying we expect to come down like a ton of bricks on these people. There is a political angle behind these things always, isn't there?
Certainly. Julia, I don't know if you can hear me, but I lost the link.
I'm sorry. Oh, you can guess what I said. Is there a lot of political stuff going on behind the scenes?
Yeah, I mean, of course there is. Chief officers are subject to direction from, in London it's the Mayor and the Home Secretary. Across the country it is the Home Secretary. So to say that there is no political influence is nonsense.
Yeah.
They largely have autonomy, but at the end of the day they can be sacked, and there is a good degree of political direction.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's really good to talk to you, Roy. Thank you very much indeed. Of course, we're waiting when any charges are brought against the man who has been arrested. Any more detail? Do you think, Tom Slater, though, there is an element where we can be a bit too hard on the police, journalists like me, and actually, I 100% of the view that we now have two-tier justice in this country in terms of policing and in terms of sentencing, but there's also an element where the police are damned if they do, damned if they don't.
Yes, somewhat. I think sometimes a decision you could make different arguments for it. We heard one there actually in support of this decision because of the fact that surely the lesson of Southport is we should be as transparent as possible. And then, of course, there's the counter-argument, which is to say this telling us about his ethnicity, this is inconsistent with what we normally see. Surely what we need is the same approach across the board, because that's kind of how criminal justice, even when you're just dealing with communication, should work. But at the same time, the police have to reckon with a fundamental lack of trust which has developed. And until you sort that out, there are going to be people who are going to criticise you, regardless of what actually takes place. There are going to be a small amount of people who won't believe what you say, unfortunately. There is this disbelieving, distrustful.
I now don't trust certain police statements. I don't, because I'm thinking, what information have you chosen to leave out? Because repeatedly we have been deliberately just misled, misguided, shall we say.
And the way in which the information is managed, we'll put this out now, we'll put this out later. People have had enough of that. It doesn't work in the social media age. Yeah. It fuels precisely the wild speculation they claim they want to be against. And also, as we've already been talking about this morning, informing all of it is fear and loathing of the public. We withhold information about Southport because we're worried how the public can respond. We'll give them more information than usual about Liverpool because we're worried about how the public will respond. And I think that we've ended up in that mess once again.
Absolutely. The fundamental issue, you've got people who are leading most of our public bodies just think that most people are scum. No, but this is my point.
So
and
much
people on social media questioning this.
If you
actually, they literally, these ghastly, awful people. They voted for Brexit. They're opposed to mass uncontrolled immigration. They don't want the channel migrants. They genuinely think that we are all just going to get our pitchforks and just burn, people down. Again, the evidence from what happened at Southport it was the vacuum of information that was the problem, and also it was that there were a load of people on a summer's evening wanting a ruck, and most of those people already had a string of convictions and they weren't motivated. This is HM Inspector of Constabulary, his report. Most of those people were not motivated by any ideological views at all. I mean, the idea that it's the far right that makes this happen. There's no politician or anyone I follow on social media is going to make me go out and throw a brick at a police officer. And that's the same for most people. 12:37 is the time. I'm going to take a quick break. Going to get to your calls. Lots of calls coming in about what Nigel Farage had to say, but also about what has happened in Liverpool as well in the policing. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Afternoon, welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense. 12:39 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Tom Slater's still here as well. Okay, usual rules. Lock the door, can't get out till 1. Lots of your calls coming on the two biggest topics we're talking about today, both what's going on, what's happened in Liverpool, that horrific attack yesterday with left 47 injured, but also talking about what Nigel Farage has had to say in a speech today as leader of Reform UK about various different changes to winter fuel allowance, going back to universal, every pensioner to get it, bringing in tax breaks for married couples. And I'd support both of those, absolutely fine. But he also wants to scrap the 2-child benefit cap. Does he think that's going to win over voters? I'd love to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Herbie is in Harrow and wants to have his say on that. Good afternoon to you, Herbie.
Good afternoon, Julia. Right, it's a good idea, providing it's fully costed and funded, that we can carry it out, then it's a very good idea. I mean, so we've got to pay back, and people want some good news for a change rather than bad news. The bird-brain ideas of past governments and this government will cost us a fortune. If we've got to repay it back, how are we going to find the money to, fund all these ideas?
Why is it a good idea to give people who keep having children that they can't look after themselves, aren't in work, and already claiming benefits to the kids they've got, to have a third, fourth or fifth child? Why is that a good idea?
Julia, it's very difficult to say on that score because I'm one of 10. I mean, so I don't think my mother got family allowance when I was born.
Did your dad work?
Like sorry, my dad worked. Yeah, both my mum and dad worked. They worked very hard all their lives,
Yeah, because they had 10 kids to feed.
Yes, exactly.
They didn't expect me to pay for them.
No, well, I don't think it was. It was hard times. I do admit that it was very hard times. But
and would times have been less hard if there hadn't been 10 kids? If there'd been 2, 4, 5 kids?
Really, I do, Julie. It's a very difficult subject to really get into. I mean,
it's not. No, it's not, Herbie. Look, a lot of us will have, like, grandparents who are like 1 of 8 or 10. I mean, people had a lot more kids. Contraception was a wonderful thing in every country. The contraception's been brought in. Doesn't matter what the religion. Doesn't matter what the background is. Women tend to restrict the number of children they have. However, women in this country have fewer children than they want. That's what all the polls show, because they can't afford to have more. So why would we be basically paying women? That's what it is. This is a benefit that goes to women to have more kids than they can already afford to look after.
Well, it's a very, as I said, it's a very, very difficult issue.
It's not a difficult issue.
Julie, you've got to be careful which road you go down with this one, because you could upset people by saying, "Oh, you're racist, you're this or the other." Listen,
sorry, wait. So where have you brought race in? And since when have I cared about upsetting people by giving my views? I mean, that would be a start.
Well,
why is it a race issue?
Well, I don't want to go down that road, because I will be accused of
something.
But
you just brought it in. Are you saying because the stats show that actually when it's much bigger families, often we are talking about ethnic minority families of immigrant heritage, so Bangladeshi and Pakistani largely, actually?
Well, Julie, the thing is that where do you draw the limit? Do you go to 2 or do you go to unlimited? Do you go to 2, keep to 2, or do you go unlimited?
2.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. Okay, if you say 2 is what... But will people accept that?
If you people have had to accept it for the last few years. At the end of the day, do you think that saying, no, you can keep having, and it's an extra almost $3,500 a year that's going from taxpayers to these families, they're giving them an extra $3,500 a year, do you think that's going to miraculously lift all these children out of poverty? Or have they just got another $3,500 when actually what they should have done is not had the extra kid? Or if they've already got the kids when they go on benefits, here's an idea, go to work.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I don't think it will lift them out of poverty. The trouble is, Julie, the system is so outdated and uncontrollable. Where do you go? Where do you draw the line? This is what I'm saying. We've got to be careful where we cost it and make sure we can afford it. There is a
we can't afford it. No, we can't afford it. All that money is being borrowed and paid for by people who are going out to work, doing the right thing, putting food on the table for their kids.
So then we need to control it. We've got to say something else. If you make this pledge, you've got to be very careful. You're going to make this promise, and if you break it, you'll be like the rest of them, won't you?
Yeah, now that's the big issue that Nigel Farage is going to break, because again, you can promise a lot, and a lot of it costs billions and billions, and then you've got to pay for it. Herbie, appreciate your call, but I think you copped out a lot there, if you don't mind me saying. And I know Brian is on the line. He's in London. I know, Brian, you also want to talk about Liverpool. Can we just start with what Reform UK had to say as well?
Yeah, basically. I mean, I think Nigel Farage has made a massive mistake, Julia. I think what he's done now is, I don't know anybody that doesn't agree with a 2-tier cap.
Yeah.
I had a friend who worked, like your friend, worked in the benefits office, and he went bonkers. He actually left because of the money they were paying out to these people. I thought Richard Tides kept saying what they were going to do. They were going to increase the tax allowance to 20,000, so that would benefit everybody that went to work.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't even think that's affordable personally.
No,
but,
I don't.
But at least there's you can understand, so it makes more sense. But what you want to do is you want to increase the earnings that people can keep, but at the same time, I mean, again, if you need benefits, I want those people to get the benefits they need, an emergency. But I don't think just, a lot of these are single mums. They go, oh, it's single mums. Well, I know loads of single mums who go out to work. Most single mums, like most mums who aren't single, go out to work. Why are this lot being given a free ride?
I really don't know. I mean, but I think the 20,000 would be a good idea, because if people, like 2 people went to work and they're paying $12,500 now, you pay tax on it, don't you? So they get $6,000 roughly each, wouldn't they?
I mean, the thing is, you've got to make up that difference somewhere.
Yeah,
Where is that rest of that money coming from? Unless you motivate more people to go out to work. But there are a lot of people who go, even whatever I earn, it's still not worth my while when I can sit on my backside for 5 days a week.
Yeah, I know. I mean, but basically, I think Nigel has made an absolute faux pas.
I think he has. Don't worry, I'll be telling him. I really will. Can I ask you also, you wanted to make a comment about Liverpool?
I mean, basically, Julia, yesterday afternoon, it's shock horror. White man commits crime. My God. What are you going to do? White man. Every time I turn the telly on, this white man. So what happens next time when some black guy or an Asian kills someone? Are they going to instantly say, oh, this man came from Timbuktu? They're not going to say that, are they?
But again, it was the fact that they felt they mentioned his race and the fact that he was British. And again, this was just the instant opposite reaction to what happened with Southport. But I'm not sure they've got to the right. I'm not sure they've come up with the right decision. But the main thing is it needs to be consistent. That's the number one thing.
Basically, that lady who was on a little while ago, I can't remember, she made some really good points about racism in this country, two-tier police, and this country stinks, Julia. I fought for this country once, and it absolutely... Well, if I was younger, I'd be out the door tomorrow.
That's my worry. A lot of young people are going to feel that. There was Laura Jane, I think you're talking about. Thank you for your call, Brian. I so appreciate that. I'm going to squeeze in one more call before we go to break. Jean is in Felixstowe. Jean, you want to talk about the two-child benefit cap that Nigel Farage wants to scrap, and something that we know that Labour want to do as well. Do you agree with him or not?
No. I mean, yes, no, I agree that it should be kept.
OK, right.
The two-child cap. Which is a shame, really, because I'm a member of Reform UK, so it's one part I don't agree with Nigel on. But anyway, I agree with him.
Why do you think he's doing it? Because he's talked about some of the things he said today is about how, you know, Labour are completely out of touch with working people. But the thing is, this isn't a benefit for working people. This isn't like child benefit that everyone gets, you know, even if you're a higher earner and you sort of pay tax on it. Well, this is about people who aren't working mostly.
Yes, the thing is, my husband and I have only got one child. Well, she's grown up now.
Yeah.
And we decided that that's what we wanted, because we wanted to give her the things which we wouldn't have been able to afford to give her if we had more than one child.
Yeah.
For example, she went to private school, she went to university. She's now a very well thought of consultant doctor of clinical psychology.
Well done, you. Round of applause for Mum and Dad, I say. But you had to make that choice. Would you have liked, if you'd had more money, would you have liked to been able to have more kids?
Possibly one more, but certainly not more than two, no.
Yeah, I'd have loved... I mean, my excuse, I started too late, so that's why I only managed one. But that's the thing, there are a lot of parents and people who make the choice and the decision not to have more kids because they can't afford them and they can't afford a bigger home, they can't afford, you know, to give them the life they want to give. But they're paying taxes to pay for people who are sitting on their backsides. That's the bit that bothers me. Jean, so appreciate your call. Thank you very much. Coming up, we're going to ask about all of this with my next guest, former Labour Special Advisor Paul Richards. Hold on to your hats. This is Talk.
It's unusual to have the skin colour of somebody mentioned at this point. Why would that have been the case, do you think?
Because of the irresponsible behaviour of people on social media and some in the mainstream media, which we saw with the incident only down the road in Southport. The police, if they've not got any grounds to think it's terrorism, will say so really early on. It's quite sad, really, that the police are trying to second-guess what the social media will be doing with the information, rather than concentrating on doing their job.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. Last few moments of my show. We're going to be handing over to Ian Collins in just a few moments' time. Still with me, Tom Slater. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's talk now to Paul Richards. He's the former Labour Party Special Advisor who's bravely joining us to talk about, well, where Labour are right now. Very, very good afternoon to you, Paul.
Hello, Julia.
Thank
how are you?
Very well indeed. Well, look, Labour, amazingly second in the polls right now. Mind you, Tories doing worse, fourth in the polls behind the Lib Dems, but Reform riding high. Big spring in his step with the leader of Reform UK, Nigel Farage, giving a press conference just under 2 hours ago, where he's talking about, well, really parking his tanks on Labour's lawn when it comes to things like wanting to scrap the two-child benefit cap, winter fuel allowance being returned to all pensioners. Although onto Tory territory with a marriage tax allowance. What do you make of the threat that Reform poses to your old party?
Well, he is a threat, and I've been saying this for months, but he's, I think, possibly overstepped the mark today because he's launched a whole load of policies without any real commitment to how it's going to be funded. And also, he's doing things like saying he's going to scrap the two-child benefit cap, which is going to go down like a cup of sick with lots of the people who might vote for Reform. And we've heard some of them already on talk, haven't we? Been really rather disgruntled.
I'm absolutely flabbergasted by this policy announcement, actually. I don't know who he thinks it's appealing to.
I mean, it's a liberal left argument. Somebody like me would think, yeah, that makes sense. It's lifting kids out of poverty. It's using the welfare system to help people. But a lot of people don't think of it in that way. So the people perhaps inclined to vote Reform, there's going to be a big revolt from the grassroots.
Do you think this will actually lift kids out of child poverty?
Well, the Resolution Foundation modelling suggests, as a think tank, they suggest that it would, and I think there are obviously families struggling right now for whom that bit of extra money for the third or fourth child that they already have is a good idea.
What would be a better solution? Can anyone think of a better solution for a family that aren't working with 3 or 4 children, how they could possibly get more money in? Can anyone think of any other way they could get money? Anyone?
You know full well that we're trying to get people into work as well, though. Of course work is the answer. Work is the answer to virtually every problem.
So giving people more benefits will definitely incentivise them to work more?
No, it means that there's children currently in poverty who won't be, which is good for growth of the economy.
But they won't be if their parent got a job next week, would they?
But we are encouraging people into work as well.
How do we encourage people into work? By giving them more benefits to have more kids?
Because you've got to look at the whole package of measures that Liz Kendall's going to be coming up with for her child poverty strategy, which is to get people, particularly young parents, into work, more apprenticeships, getting people into trades and into the training that they need, because we need people working.
Yeah, I'm all in favour of all of that, but those aren't largely on young parents, but mostly we want people to be able to pay their own kids, and if they can't
There's
afford
another argument there. Another argument which again appeals to the right. Of course, we do need to repopulate the UK. We're sort of in danger of dying as a society because we're not having enough children. And I think this
do we want to encourage people who won't work and can't afford to look after their own children to have an, or do we want to encourage people who've been good contributors to society already, providing for their children? Because I'm thinking maybe people want their kids more.
Well, I'm not going to.
Is that eugenics? I don't know.
I'm not going to make that judgment whose kids deserve more than others. I just think we need a bigger population.
I'm just saying No, we don't need a bigger population. What we need is more people working. We need more young people working. The children of people who don't work largely don't work themselves. Worklessness breeds worklessness.
Well, children growing up in poverty are often then excluded from the society and
how are they excluded from society?
Well, they will be if they grow up in poverty, which is why I want to get people out of poverty.
How are they excluded from society?
Well, because they can't afford to do the things that you and I might do, like go to the theatre or travel
if you can't go to the theatre, millions of people can't afford to go to the theatre because they're paying so much tax and paying so much for their housing.
I think those kinds of opportunities that are there for middle class kids should be available to all. And a small measure like this, is part of a bigger package of getting into the mainstream of society, including work, which we all agree is
okay.
Not just said, is it?
I know it's not being glib, but I think it's interesting. The first thing you jumped to. What about winter fuel allowance to all pensioners? We know there's already been a hint of a U-turn from the Prime Minister on that.
I don't think, God bless him, Mick Jagger deserves the return.
Why not? Why not? He's paid millions of pounds in tax. Why not give him an extra 300 a week?
Because the millionaires do not need the money, which again...
No, but he's already paid for his own. He's paid for my winter fuel allowance in years to come, yours and every pensioner right now. He's paid enough tax, probably, when he wasn't living out of the country.
It should be going to those that deserve it the most, which was why I think you'll see a recalibration from the government. But for Nigel Farage to say, millionaires should get this free tax, this money from taxpayers, I think, again, is an astonishing move for him to make.
Why do you think it was paid to everyone originally? It's because the cost of means testing is greater than the actual benefits you get from cutting out some of the richer
Well, I think
pensions.
that was originally true, but I think nowadays it's not. It's easier to do that. But I think where the line is drawn, I think needs to be debated. I think there are more people that should be getting the winter fuel allowance. But Nigel's saying give it to millionaires. Doesn't help with the whole he's on the side of the millionaires.
Yeah, but the millionaires aren't going to notice it. They're just going to heat their pools.
Exactly.
They're not
exactly.
But they've already paid for
it.
Or you just put it in with the main benefit, the main pension, and then people can get they can get taxed on it, and you can solve it that way. Just finally, really briefly, Kosovo, we're told, is open to becoming a return hub for failed UK asylum seekers. The president has welcomed talks. We know that Albania have said no. The Rwanda scheme was scrapped, and that was scrapped, and that was for people who, even before they were failed. First of all, do you think that would be welcome? Is that something that the British public would want? And do you think it'll ever happen?
I think it's a good idea to look at because Kosovo loves us. Don't forget, the Kosovans think the UK is a wonderful thing.
But they want a load of asylum seekers,
and I think they would be willing to work with our government. And the signals are that it would work, and that would help speed up applications, stop the boats, and all the things that we all want.
Of course, they would assume that people actually got through the system and were actually failed before you could actually send them anywhere, though.
Well, it's not the single thing you would do, but it is one of the things you could do. And I think, as I say, we have very good relations with Kosovo. There are lots of kids called Tony Blair, believe it or not, in Kosovo.
Really?
And, absolutely true. It's a government that is in alliance with us, so why not? And then that is another way that we can try and cut down illegal immigration and legal migration too.
Paul Richards, that's my favourite fact of the day. Thank you, former Labour Party Special Advisor. Tom Slater, lots of kids called Tony Blair in Kosovo. Come back on whatever you want to come back on.
I believe I'm right in saying that's because that's like their first name, so they'd be called Tony Blair and then whatever their surname is. It's a staggering phenomenon of geopolitics.
There we are. Well, I mean, coming up right now on the station, of course, is Tony Blair, Ian Collins.
Yeah,
Hello.
exactly. When you said Costco, I thought you said Costco, and I thought, for goodness sake, what's going on over there? Is it some sort of discount system they've got going on, which may be a bit more beneficial to the public purse? I don't know.
Right. First, I mean, presumably you're going to be talking more about Liverpool.
Yeah, we're going to speak to the Mayor of Liverpool as well. He's going to come on, Steve Rotherham, just to sort of talk over where it's at. He's in touch, obviously, with Downing Street, and I mean, it is just horrific. The information bit I heard you talking at the beginning. Was that the right approach, the way they put it up? We know why they did it, and of course, but if you look at social media, man alive, have you seen some of the speculation?
See mine, my replies.
There is an extraordinary amount of speculation. I mean, most of it is just invented old
guff. But what's amazing speculation, even once we've got the information.
Once you've got the information, no, that's not good enough. It was some sort of special secret operation by Downing Street. You've got all the conspiracy stuff.
But again, people don't trust authorities anymore because we've been lied to about lots of things, and I think they.
Do you think it's that, though? I mean,
yes, I think
it's some of it.
A lot of it is bots and people stirring things up.
Of course it is, and social media does that.
And Nigel Farage, of course.
Nigel Farage, he's got a